Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figured Out cast for, April now? April 2022. Dude, the time is flying already.
Time has no meaning anymore.
It really seriously starts to feel like that. Like, I cannot believe it's already April. Wow. By the way, if you're young and you're not, because you're listening to this, but if you are, it only gets worse as you get older. Like, every single month becomes a week becomes a day becomes an hour. You know what I'm talking about. And then eventually you die.
Actually, funny you bring that up. I was just thinking about it, and I think this is my 2-year anniversary of being on the podcast. That's fucked up to think.
If you want to keep Rob, by the way, he is Patreon tier, which we're above, but there's always that possibility of falling below. So this is a Patreon-backed podcast. So if you support the Patreon, in addition to supporting me, you also get access to this early. You get all the videos early. You can also get shout-outs. You can pick subjects, and you can be on the podcast as well as keep Rob around. As we've said, he is the DLC, the horse armor of the podcast. But like I said, you do get to be on the podcast, and we have one such person. What up, Abdullah?
Hello, how are you?
So let's go ahead and get started with our subjects. Now, as always, podcast hosts, guests, whatever, you get to pick a subject. And Abdullah, this is, in this case, we decided to help you out a little bit. We threw you one that we thought was kind of interesting, and you seem to agree. But
yeah, I like it.
Yeah, so technically this was his choice, even though, I'm going to be fair, Rob actually wrote it, but I Abdullah liked it. So
it's okay, I keep him, right? So it's possible to
he is your property. You can do with Rob what you want. And so you wanted to know, what is a game or a series that always gets recommended to you that you've never actually played? Now, since technically Rob wrote this, I'm going to let him kind of start that off.
So yeah, the thought is, like, if you hang around with fellow game collectors or gamers in general, you're obviously going to get recommendations. So your friends are going to be like, oh, have you played this game? And you could say, like, oh, yes. Like, generally, if you're hanging out with friends, a lot of times you have similar tastes in games. But not always. Like, your friends will say, man, we've all played this game, how come you haven't? And you're like, I don't know. And maybe it's just like the idea doesn't sound intriguing to you, or it doesn't sound interesting, or it doesn't sound like a type of game or genre that you would like, but people still keep recommending it to you. So, Abdullah, what do you think?
Believe it or not, I don't know, but I've never properly played Resident Evil. But I've heard about it being really good.
The original one, or like any of the games?
Oh, any of the games. Maybe I played like those few 2-3 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't consider myself really playing it. I don't technically play that a lot. I have so many examples, but this is just one of them.
Yeah, I say stick with Resident Evil because at least I can. I don't know if Rob qualifies here, but I can at least talk knowledgeably about Resident Evil. If you were going to play Resident Evil, which I would recommend, I would say start with the first one. I would actually say you can go ahead and play the remake, the GameCube remake, which was eventually remade and re-released again on like PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X. That game. It's on the Switch as well. Start there if you ever have any interest in trying that franchise, because it's really good, but it derails after a few games, if you ask me, and then eventually kind of found its footing again. Did you ever play Luigi's Mansion?
Yes.
Okay, Luigi's Mansion is Resident Evil 1 for kids. That's what it is.
You're not wrong.
It's exactly what it is. You're in like a mansion, and it's essentially a puzzle-solving game with like horror elements, and then it has it's some fights here and there. Essentially they're the same game, and so if you liked Luigi's Mansion but you want to take it in a more serious direction, Resident Evil 1. And if you like that, then I'll bet you'll like the continuing series up until a point. I would say that Resident Evil 4, and I know it's sacrilege, but I think Resident Evil 4 is really where the series kind of went downhill for quite some time.
Would you suggest to Abdullah to, if you want to at least dip your toe in, obviously the first one would be the way to go, but But if you wanted just kind of a feel, and if you're more attuned to modern gaming, like, I would almost say it's like, if the idea just intrigues you, like, try Resident Evil 7. Because at least to me, Resident Evil 7 felt the most like the original Resident Evil since then.
Resident Evil 7 is a very good game, but it might as well be called generic horror game. Like, it has nothing to do with Resident Evil outside of a handful of like references. It's not really like a sequel per se. I mean, technically it's set in the same universe, but you wouldn't really know that unless you were really deep into the lore.
But I mean,
if I'm not mistaken, just a quick question here. There was a Resident Evil on the VR, right?
Yeah, there's
yes,
Resident Evil
that's
4.
7.
And 4.
No,
I
7.
think that's the
7.
one I played.
He's talking about 7.
Yeah, maybe that's the one I played for like 2-3 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's why I didn't like it. I don't know. I wouldn't say I really didn't like it. I didn't really give it a proper chance. I didn't properly play that.
Sure.
Give it a chance,
I've heard that game is
hearing-
actually great in VR.
I can't really give a comment because 2-3 minutes are not suitable.
Yeah.
I agree. I also hate VR, so I would be biased because I like that game, and if I played it in VR, I would not like it. But that's because I don't like VR. So that's an interesting side tangent of what can really alter your perception of a game. But anyway, Resident Evil 7 is a good game, but it is not what I would say is the introduction to the franchise because it essentially has nothing to do with the franchise. It might as well have been a completely different horror game that Capcom said, let's just call this Resident Evil 7 so that it sells more. I know that's not why it was made. I understand that. But from a purely consumer perspective of just what is the product, that's how it comes off to me. So I would recommend Resident Evil 1, especially because you did say you liked Luigi's Mansion.
Okay, but that was the kids version.
Luigi's Mansion is the kids version of Resident Evil 1. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good fertile answer. Thank you, Abdullah. Rob, what about you?
So my first instinct is just say like RPGs, just because all of my friends are super into turn-based RPGs, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Phantasy Star, like all like the great game of the year award-winning RPGs that everybody seems to love, the critical darlings, but I just can't get into. But I'm actually going to say something that like probably surprised a few people is I've never played Mega Man. Any of the Mega Man games.
And you actually own Mega Man for Game Gear.
I do. I own Mega Man from Game Gear. I own Wily Wars, the recent release. I've got Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo. I have Mega Man games. I've just never played them.
That's normal. Same with Resident Evil for me. Yeah. I own some of the games, but I didn't ever play them.
It is funny you say that because like I'm kind of with you. I've played more Mega Man than you have, but not. I would never dare to call myself like a Mega Man fan. I think the only one I ever played extensively would have been like maybe the first one on NES, like at my cousin's house during like holidays, like because I didn't, probably like you, Rob, I didn't really grow up with an NES, and that was, to be real, in North America where Mega Man kind of was prominent. Yeah. Other than eventually PS1, but when he was on the PlayStation, by then it was kind of like it just wasn't our genre. And I think it's because other than Wily Wars, which we never even got anyway, there really were no Mega Man games on Sega hardware.
And I was a Sega kid until the N64. I never had a Super Nintendo. Yeah. I never had an NES. I did have a Game Boy, but like, who's playing those Mega Man games really as their introduction? So by the time like the N64 came out, and you have like Mega Man 64. And then, like, the weird ones, like Command Mission on the GameCube and stuff going forward. It's like, I'm like, why am I going to play these?
To be fair, just so we don't get people correcting us in the comments, there were Mega Man games on the Saturn. It's just that we didn't have, certainly neither of us had Saturns. I mean, I know I didn't have a Saturn as a kid. I guess
I even have Mega Man 8 on the Saturn. I've never played
it. Well, all I'm trying to say is I'm kind of with Rob on this because unless you actually were an NES kid...
Yeah.
there's a very good chance in North America, at our age range, that's a huge factor to this asterisk, is that unless you were an NES kid in our age range, you probably weren't too into Mega Man unless you were just that oddball kid that actually had the Game Gear and had Mega Man on it, or you were the oddball kid who had the Saturn and had Mega Man 8 or whatever. Maybe X4, I think was the other one we got. X3 came out in Europe. But yeah, and then same with SNES, to be fair. If you had an SNES, there were Mega Man games. But as you pointed out, you were a Sega kid, and so was I. So I could see why you would miss that, and I had about as much exposure to it as you did.
And I never had a PS1 either. It's like I really went from Sega Genesis to Nintendo 64 as like my early formative consoles. So, I mean, and a lot of my friends were Nintendo kids. So they started with Mega Man 1 or 2 on the NES, progressed through the X series on the Super Nintendo, and really have that connection, that deep connection, especially to those early 2D Mega Man games. You know. And I wish I had it. I mean, anytime I hear like a piece of music from the series, I'll be like, wow, what is that? And they're like, yeah, this is from like Mega Man 4. And I'm like, oh, this is a really good song. Or, you know, I'll look at it, I'm like, what? You know, the gameplay is really fascinating to me, but it's just like I've never really dove into it.
Okay. Well, then for my answer, you know, it's funny. I was actually gonna, because I'm with you on the RPGs thing. Like, people recommend RPGs to me all the time, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't care. I don't like turn-based RPGs. So my answer was originally going to be like a Final Fantasy or something like that, but I think it's too standard. Something like a Fire Emblem, it's still a little too standard for me. Because you made me think. Originally, my answer was going to be Final Fantasy, but then I thought, no, let's look at a game franchise I would probably really like, and I just have never got around to playing. And I know I'm going to offend you, Rob, I hope. The Last of Us.
Ooh, wow.
And the thing is, it's not that I'm any way opposed. I just have never got off my ass and actually played it. Like, I've just never got around to it.
Dive in here. I remember when I said I had many options. That was my third that on my list. That was the third one. One of the ones I was gonna mention. It was third on my list was Last of Us.
There you go.
But I mean, here's the difference between Mega Man and Resident Evil, like mine and Abdullah's picks, versus Last of Us. Like, Last of Us can be done in a weekend. Like, those are just the first game is all of like 5 hours long. And then the second one you can knock off in a few days if you really get into it. It's like, so that's surprising that you haven't found the time.
You can get through Resident Evil 1 in a few hours. What are you talking about?
No, but I'm talking about the series, because it's really a gateway.
Oh, sure. I thought we were talking about just having one game, and then that kind of goes from there. Not to get through the entirety of a franchise.
No, but it's under the assumption that if you start with Resident Evil 1 or you start with Mega Man 1, you're going to kind of, and you really do like them, you're going to progress into the rest of the series. Like, Last of Us is arguably a standalone game. It's Chapter 1 and Chapter 2.
Okay.
So, I mean,
I'm not saying no. I'm just saying it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Like, I own them. I should do that. I'm very aware. Just haven't.
Yeah. So
that's the problem, by the way, if you guys are out there. I mean, a lot of you probably have that, too, because you're all collectors and stuff. But that's the big problem, is like, we all own these games we never get around to playing. He's got Mega Man on Game Gear, probably in the box, too, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so you make a ton of people envious of that. Don't care at all that you even have it. It's like, I understand. The next subject comes from Chuck Shaw, who he never got back to me. Well, he did, but he said he would get back to me later and then didn't. And I just got a message from him while we've been recording saying, sorry, I fell asleep. I have no subject. So this is kind of perfect because we came up with one for him. Well, actually, Rob also came up with this one. And Rob, I don't like to give you credit for stuff, but this was a better subject than you realize. You wanted to talk about some of the best game stores we've ever been to.
Yes.
The reason that's good for two reasons. One, obviously, Abdullah is going to be here to join us for that, and you've been doing a lot with a game store over there, which is cool.
Yeah.
And two, you probably don't know this, and you're going to claim you did, and I know you didn't know this, Rob, so don't lie to the audience, but Chuck actually owned a game store for years. That's how he got into Mo GameCon, is that he owned a retro game store in St. Louis.
Interesting.
Game Trader, too. Alas, it no longer exists, but that's, I think, kind of a perfect segue. So Rob, you go for it.
So yeah, I kind of was tasked with coming up with a subject on the last minute, and since I work in a video game store part time, I always kind of have that mindset on me. So I say to you guys, what is the best video game store you've ever been to? And 2, what is the worst video game store that you've ever been to? And I will say, I think we should try at least to exclude something like GameStop or like Walmart.
Oh yeah, those don't even count. That would have never even hit.
Because, like, I mean, any random visit to a GameStop is basically a disgusting, terrible experience that I immediately regret.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, I know. Okay, so I thought you were going to be like, we have to exclude, like, I don't know what I thought you were going to say, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
I am going to exclude digital press, at least for my personal one, because I have a bias for that.
Because you work there. Okay,
yes.
That's fine.
Okay, so can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Because my answer is going to be very weird compared to yours, because we don't have even proper game stores here.
Mm-hmm.
We have those big retail chains, yes, but as an independent store, the only store I know of is my friend's store, Gamer Squad. So that's the only proper store that I know of, and I'm not technically part of the store, but I'm always there, like helping out sometimes and being part of it. So, and the reason is because it was an amazing game store when I found it, and the owner's one of the best people I've ever met. He's a close friend of mine now, Sayed. So shout out to him. Amazing store. He sells amazing stuff, and he's able to provide lots of things that, it's kind of tough to get those things down here, but he actually provides them. He has good sources. And more than that, it's an amazing experience, actually, when you go in. It feels like home. And that's why I wanted to help out in that store, because of the amazing experience I had. So I honestly can't give you an answer to this, because that is the one and the only store, and I don't think any store would pop up soon to be as great as that.
So that store, is it mainly retro games, or is it a combination of retro and modern?
Okay.
Like, what do they have there?
Okay, so here's the thing. He's really into retro, just like me, and he's a fan of you guys as well. He's a big fan.
Oh, well, the feeling's mutual.
What's up, dude?
All right, thanks. So definitely, I'm pretty sure he's gonna hear this when it's released. Definitely, he's into retro, but he does all around. He has modern retro, and there's a lot of hype for statues here. If you don't know, there's a lot of hype. So he usually has to, pursue his passion of retro games, as well as make sure to put modern games and statues into his shop to go with the market here.
All right, Rob, how about you?
So, best store. I mean, I could easily say just like any given, like Super Potato or Book Off or something in Japan, because I mean, Adam, as you know, it's the land of milk and honey. Just really, really incredible place to go game hunting. But I kind of want to represent like my local stores, so I have to kind of give a shout out to a place that I've actually taken you a couple times, at least once, Adam. A place in Hillsdale, New Jersey called the Game Zone. And the Game Zone used to be about 20 minutes from my childhood home. And it's run by my buddy Anthony. And it's a mom and pop game store that has actually been around since the 90s. I distinctly remember, if you're from the New Jersey, New York area, and you were alive or a child during the 90s, I'm sure you'll remember the commercials on TV where they'd be like, I'm going to the Game Zone. It's like, come to the Game Zone in 2 locations in North New Jersey, for all of your Super Nintendo needs, things like that. And so it's been around for a long time, actually a lot longer than Digital Press as a storefront. But this current incarnation, it's great, but similar to, you said it's Game Squad, right? Is where is Your store, Abdullah?
Gamers Squad, yeah.
Gamer Squad, yeah. So similar to Gamer Squad, they've had to diversify a lot more and start catering to card collecting and card games like Pokemon or Magic the Gathering, things like that. They also have like a lot of knickknacks and gamer-related paraphernalia, games and like board games, plushies, things like that. But in terms of their video game section, it's hearty. They get interesting stuff. They get different stuff than I get over at Digital Press in terms of trade-ins. They also stock new games unlike Digital Press, so I'd rather go there and spend my money as opposed to going to a GameStop or a Best Buy or a Target if I can avoid it. And they also, they just have a great selection of games. It's a really warm and fun environment to just kind of hang out in. Anytime I go in there, I end up spending 45 minutes just kind of walking around, talking to my friend. It's a great little store, and I highly recommend. It kind of gets passed over because in the New York City, New Jersey area, there's a lot of dedicated independent game stores. Digital Press being the big one. There's 2 locations for Digital Press. Level 1 Games on Route 23. Pandora's Box has a great game section. There's places down the shore, places like Video Games New York in the city. So there's a lot of stores in the area if you want to shop exclusively independent game stores. So I think it gets overlooked a little bit, because of its emphasis on trading cards and things. But it's a great, great little store.
Are you going to do your worst one now, or are we waiting?
How about you tell me your best, and then we'll trade our worst.
Okay, I'm going to approach this kind of like the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, where you break down to a whole bunch of different subsects of what is your best for different reasons.
Okay.
Only because, as you full well know, I get around, so I've been to a lot of different stores around the world. And so I would say, as you pointed out, best country to buy video games in, Japan. You could just go like anywhere and they're there. I would say the best area, the best district I've ever been to buy video games, Republique in Paris, France.
Oh,
also,
yeah.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. I would say the video game store with the best marketing I have ever seen. Shout out to Kelsey Lewin, Pink Gorilla. Everyone knows of them. Every retro gamer knows of them, regardless if they've ever been to Seattle or not. And they buy the merch without ever even going to a store. So it's like they've done a very good job of giving it a brand recognition as a store rather than just being a game store that you can buy stuff at, if that makes any sense. So shout out to them on that. I think I would have to, but overall, and I'm not biased like you two, just picking stuff around me, I think my favorite all-time game store anywhere on this planet is Toy Rat, Milton, Ontario, Canada. I've done many videos on that place. Granted, I haven't been there in a few years because of the pandemic. I wasn't able to get up there or whatever. But you guys can go back in time and see some of those videos. Like, the dude who runs that place is like the nicest guy ever. He always has like crazy inventory. He's always willing to cut deals on everything. And just, I've picked up so much of my best stuff in his store, like the Blue Bell Xbox, the Mountain Dew Xbox, my Vectrex, my first Famicom, all that kind of stuff really came from him. And it was, he cut me like insane deals. So I've always tried to pay it forward. And like, anytime I'm up there, I'm like, hey, let's do like, meetups at Toy Rat. 'Cause it's just a cool place to like hang out as well as get video games. And he always had like awesome inventory, and just hell of a nice guy.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that place a lot. I remember seeing your videos, kind of store tours and stuff that you've done up there. And I'm actually looking at it on Google Maps right now. It's only a 7-hour drive from me. I would love to go there. Everything that I've seen about that place is that it's totally legit. I guess, you know what, after our experience in Montreal, too, I think Canada is kind of like an unsung place for retro games.
I've been saying for years that other than the Pacific Northwest, like specifically Washington area, that Southern Ontario was mecca for retro games in the U.S. In North America, obviously not the U.S. But it goes totally unsung because it happens to be in Canada. The problem is basically just the exchange rate and the fact that you have to get to another country, which I'm sorry to say to most people is like, oh well, that kills it. It's like, dude, it's Canada. It's not that hard to get to.
Yeah, I'm going there next week. It's super easy.
Yeah, it's not that hard, but to a lot of people, it's like super intimidating. But whatever, that doesn't matter. But it's best to do that type of thing. I'm going to say this as boldly and frankly as I can, during some sort of economic crisis where the Canadian loonie has fallen substantially. That way your US dollar is vastly stronger. But also I'm looking at it through the rose-tinted glasses of a time machine, because I remember going up there like 10 years ago and getting tons of stuff for like nothing.
Yeah.
And it was just because like it just like every retro collector will tell you that, like, oh, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I was getting this and that for like nothing. I was doing that. I was always like that, as you probably noticed in my last playload when like, even as a kid I was like that apparently. But yeah, so I don't know what it would be like to shop there now, but as you pointed out, you and I went to Montreal and we still found good cool stuff, and that's another reason I like international game hunting a little bit more than I do American game hunting, because you see stuff that's actually different.
Yeah.
And you see stuff that had different amounts of things, certain releases you never got to see, or even entire consoles you never got to see, and sometimes things that were just more prevalent in one place or another. I would be willing to wager that the majority of the time the US got the better deal on stuff, like how much of it was produced or whatever. But when you get to see that one oddball thing show up in Canada, for example, that's a lot of fun. But that's why I would say Japan overall just wins, as you full well know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed our time game hunting in Montreal. I mean, both of us kind of left with some good stuff. And who knows, maybe we got to meet up in Toy Rack sometime.
Hit me up. We should do a Toronto trip.
Yeah, I'm definitely down. It's been I think 4 years since I've been to Toronto, so I'd absolutely be down. Oh, and I think we also need to eventually pay a visit to the UAE and go visit the Gamer Squad. We're gonna crash on your couch.
Yeah, you better have spare couches. I mean, you and Rob can share a bedroom.
Yeah, we're gonna do a little just friends spooning, but yeah.
You're like, it's no longer. We don't have to DM each other anymore. We can now actually be in each other. Okay, let's move on. Rob? What is your worst game store?
I think you've got a pretty good idea of what my worst.
I do, but I was gonna save that, but I would love for you to tell that one. Please do.
Fucking 8-bit and up games.
Rob, now what is 8-bit and up games?
It is the
do tell.
The 7th level of fucking hell. 8-bit up games is a retro game store in Manhattan. Down in the Lower East Side. What street is that on? It's on 3rd Street. Like around 1st Avenue. And this place is kind of like a basement. Like you have to walk down like a flight of stairs from the street level to go down into the store. And this place it looks like it hasn't been cleaned in 10 years.
Dude, 15, 20.
Now, to be fair, I've been to some really shitty looking game stores, and sometimes if it's really dusty and dirty, that means nobody has been there, and you can find some like interesting stuff if you hold your nose and you dig a little bit. Like, I've been to places like that. This is not one of those places. This place has people in it all the time. It is, I would say, fairly well stocked, all things considered. And it has some good stuff on display, but rarely does anything have prices on it. It's often in really terrible condition, and you have to deal with the absolutely insufferable piece of shit owner of that store.
He's so not exaggerating. He's so not exaggerating. Dude, just tell him the story of events of what happened.
Okay. So, second time we're name-dropping James Reiner on this podcast. So
And he'll still never listen to it.
So, no, I think we need to tell him, it's like, yo, we're talking about 8-bit and up. He's like, I'm there. I'm listening to it. So, me, Adam, and our mutual friend, James Reiner, we're going restaurant hopping, video game store hopping in Lower Manhattan. Okay, well, there is this one store, like 3 blocks away, and I mentioned it, and neither of you guys had heard of it. You're like, how come you didn't tell us about this place? I'm like, there's kind of a reason. Because I had been in there a few times, and every time it wasn't a good experience. So we walk a few blocks down, and we go to 8-bit and up. And we walk in the middle of a argument? Or...
No. That hadn't happened yet.
Yes. Okay.
The guy was live streaming on Twitch.
Well, yeah, the owner was live streaming. I forget the owner's name. He has dreadlocks.
It's better that you don't know his name.
If you've been there, you know the guy. And he like, we walk in and he screams something in our face. What is he?
I remember what he said. He looked at us and he's live streaming. He makes it clear to us that he's live streaming on Twitch via webcam. I don't remember what he was streaming. I think it was like a live performance. I don't know what the hell he was doing. But he looked at us and he's like, "Yo, guys, if you want to fuck a bitch, what's the first thing you ask her?" And we were like, "Dude, we're just here to buy games, man." That was how the guy opened conversation with us.
So we're like, okay, so that was a bit awkward. So we start kind of milling around the store. We can't get to the back because he's like blocking the aisle with his like camera and like streaming on Twitch. So we're kind of hanging up at the front and looking behind the counter, and they have some good stuff. They had a sealed copy of this sticks in my mind because it's actually one that I've really wanted, and was the best price, and I really should have picked it up. There was a sealed copy of Castlevania Bloodlines.
Dude, you're skipping ahead. Do you not remember how the two of him and his employee just started screaming at each other?
Fuck. Dad, there's so much about this business.
Let me just do this. Okay, so he asks us if you want to fuck a bitch, what do you first ask her? We're like, I think you actually made a joke and said ASL. ASL. like as if it's the late 90s. And it kind of diffused this really awkward tension. Anyway, then this guy we don't know walks up to us, and we thought he was just making conversation because he was normal. He was like, "So what kind of games do you like?" You know, that type of thing. Yeah. And then after that, we realize he's an employee because he starts getting into a screaming match with the owner about things that, let's just say, Rob and I are the wrong skin color to talk about. It was very, very awkward.
It was heated. It was
nasty. They were screaming at each other, and they were saying things like people of certain ethnicities need to cut down trees to feel better about themselves, and that therapy isn't real. And it's like they're just spouting they're just yelling at each other with all sorts of statements. Let's just say politically charged statements, ethnically charged statements, racially charged statements. It was one of the most... And they were friends. That was the weirdest thing. They weren't even like mad at each other. They were like yelling at a situation that didn't exist. I don't know how else to put this. They were just screaming at each other about things that were like... You're sitting there, they're doing this in front of you, like customers.
People are looking in walking by on the street, they're like, what the fuck is going on?
Eventually, I'm like, I'm done. I don't want anything in here. Like, even if I wanted to buy something, I don't want to walk into the middle of that storm to try and pay for it. So I just walked outside, and when I was outside, you could hear them very clearly screaming into the street, and everybody who walked past was staring in there. And I'm like, dude, this is Manhattan. This is like the city that never sleeps. These people have seen everything, but these people hadn't seen this shit. And it was absolutely bonkers. You take over because this is where it actually happened to you.
So, like, I want to buy something because I want to support local game stores. Not anymore. So I want to support the place, and like they actually had something I was interested in. They had a sealed copy of Castlevania Bloodlines behind the counter, And I'm like, well, that's cool. You don't see sealed Genesis stuff. It was actually the cardboard box version of the game. And I want to see it. I'm like, oh, is this an original seal? And how much is he asking for it? Because it had some damage, but, like, you know, for something that cool, it's like, and the game itself is normally very expensive. So I'm like, let me take a look at it. So I somehow insert myself and just be like, excuse me, sir, can I please see a video game? And, you know, I tell him, like, can I see this game? And still in mid-argument with this other guy, he storms behind the counter, grabs this game off of the shelf, and throws it at me. And, like, I'm not ready to catch this fucking thing, so it, like, bounces off my shoulder or something like that and hits the ground. And I'm like, what the fuck is this that I think that at that point, James walks out. He's like, nope, done. I'm tapping out. And I look at it, and it has a price tag on it, and I think it was, like, $90, which even for a complete in box copy of Castlevania Bloodlines is really good. That's a really good price for that, let alone a sealed copy, and it was the original seal and everything. So I end up, like, spend the next 5 minutes awkwardly standing there in the middle of this giant shouting match, trying to interject just long enough to ask to pay for this. And during this time, if I was any worse of a human being, I could have just walked out with this game. They were fully invested in this argument. And but I'm going to stand there. I'm, like, holding my wallet in my hands, and it takes 5 minutes for me to just get the fucking clue and just, you know what, fuck this, and walk out. And epilogue, I actually went back because I can't take a fucking hint. I go back a couple months later. This was like 3 months ago. I'm like, I wonder if that copy is still there. Because I'm like, the price has gone up even more on that. So I'm like, so I go in, and there's no shouting match, but the same guy is there. The guy with the dreads. I think his name's Marcus. And I ask him, I'm like, hey, can I see that game? And it still has the price tag on it. I'm like, sweet. And I hand it to him. And I go to pay, and I go to the cash register. And he's like, that'll be $350. I'm like, fucking what? Which is above market price for this game at this point. And I'm like, the price tag says this. Well, the price tag is fucking wrong. You want it? And I'm like, and I fucking laugh, and I walk out. And I'm just like, fuck this place, never again. 8-bit up, you're absolute fucking trash. Nobody ever go there. Unless you want to either get tetanus, have a really funny fucking story to tell your gamer friends, or just have a terrible experience at a video game store. It made me want to go to GameStop.
You know, if you remember when we walked out of there, we actually, like, looked them up on, like, Facebook just to see, like, what people say about them on their page. And a lot of people said exactly, they're like, some of the inventory is okay, but all the employees do is yell at each other. And I'm like, so this is normal for this store. They just scream at each other all day.
Out on Google, it currently has a very generous rating of 3.6 stars. Ugh. But look, scrolling through, most of these positive reviews are from, like, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Sure. So to add to that, obviously I would include that store on that list. Two others that I would add. One, you do know, although I don't have any horror story there. It's just kind of hilarious. J&L Games, also in Manhattan.
Oh, God. Great store. Once again, museum quality stuff. But every single thing is beyond unreasonably priced. And we're talking, like, retail. And double the price.
Yeah, so you can walk in and be like, oh, look, an Amiibo came out. Amiibos are like $15 US. They'll be like charging $45. And we're not talking about like rare ones. We're talking about like the commons that were made available everywhere. A brand new game costs $60. We charge $100 for it here. It's like, it's not, they just charge above retail. They just do it. And I don't know how the hell they're in business.
Although last time I was there with you, and I ended up finding some stuff for under retail because
surprise, it was some Game Gear stuff, wasn't it?
It was some Game Gear stuff, and
they were probably just trying to get rid of it.
And there was a sealed GameCube memory card because, as I said, the interesting thing about independent stores is sometimes stuff doesn't get bought and sits for a really long time, and the market rises around it, and the price still stays the same. So if you dig deep enough, sometimes you can get a good deal. But I had to dig for that deal.
So the only other one I have that's even remotely comparable to that, I'm not going to name the store, partially because I just don't remember what it was called. But it's in Southern Ontario, so it's kind of funny because both my best and my worst are in the same area. But I remember the guy's name, but I'm not going to say his name. A buddy of mine took myself and my girlfriend, who is in town currently, as it happens.
Hey.
Yeah, Felipe, what's up?
Hi, Mrs. Claus.
She can't hear you. Anyway, so my buddy took us to this store. He's like, we've been game hunting all day. We haven't found anything. I'm going to take you to the store, but I'm warning you, the guy who runs it is really weird. And we're like, okay. So we go into this store, and the store is like a disaster. Like, you walk inside, and it's like a nice retail store as far as the space goes, but it's like a little kid designed it. So it's just crap is just thrown everywhere. There is no organization of any kind whatsoever. It was very apparent that whenever the guy got trade-ins, he just took the stuff and just like put it on the floor or put it on the counter or on the shelves or whatever. There was no attempt at like, here's an Xbox section. It was like, this is all the shit in my store. It was chaos. But you know, we're like, whatever, that can be good because it means you can dig around and you can find, you know, God knows what, and maybe it's a good deal, especially because, my buddy Scott knew this guy and the guy watched my channel. And at the time I was doing a lot of, game store videos, and he even openly said he wanted me to do one. So I was kind of considering it. But I have a policy, which is if I'm not going to buy anything in your store, I'm also not making a video about it because I'm not going to start recommending a place that I didn't bother to shop at. I think that's reasonable. Yeah. So anyway, so we're looking around the store, and I keep seeing things that are like interesting to me, but he naturally, given the chaos, he's one of those places that doesn't organize his stuff or price his stuff at all. So you have no clue what he's expecting anything to be. So I eventually found 2 Sega CD games. One was Shining Force CD complete.
Oh, okay.
And one was Terminator CD complete.
Oh.
Now, the irony of this is that I should have done it because now it would actually have been a good deal. But at the time, it was a terrible deal because you're talking about something that happened like 10 years ago. So I remember that I look at these 2 games. I look them up on eBay. At the time, Terminator was like $50, if you can believe that, and Shining Force CD was like $100. And so I was like, okay, so like $150. If he cuts me in on, and granted, you know, we're talking CAD, by the way, but if he's willing to cut me in a bit, you know, maybe like $125 for the pair, maybe even lower than that. You know what? Sub eBay, support local, something to do. Then I can also justify making a video or something. Maybe we can make something happen here, right? I will never forget this for the rest of my life. So I basically said, like, so what do these cost? And he's like, let me check. And all he did was go to eBay and do exactly what I did. Because he doesn't organize anything. And then he comes back at me with the weirdest statement I've ever heard any game store owner say. He goes, that one's going for about 50. That one's going for about 100. How about you give me like 200 for the pair? And I was like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, that wasn't even like that. That's not a negotiation position. You just admitted you're trying to rip me off. It was, and then the funny thing is, Felipa was super into collecting comics at the time, and she was going through like all his comics, and she was pulling out all these ones that she really wanted. And then as soon as he said that, she just put all of them back. She's like, "This is just going to be stupid. I'm not going to waste my time with this." And then he could tell that we were like kind of done and that we were just going to leave. And so he's like, hey, do you guys want to see my trade room? And we're like, you're what? He's like, I have a whole different store I don't let people go into, and it's just stuff to trade. And we were like, how does that work? He's like, well, I'll show you. So we go up there, and it's like a warehouse. It's like the entire top section of a building. and it's full of just amazing things. And I mean amazing things. Like, he had like a stack. Try to imagine this. He had a stack of Bluebell Xboxes, maybe like 10 of them.
Wow.
Just sitting there. He had tons and tons of stuff. But he also was one of those people who didn't really care about what was actually in there. So, like, he had the windows up all the time and everything was getting sun faded. He had stacks of Dreamcast games and Saturn games, all of it, all just getting sun faded sitting there. And we're like looking around and, I found a couple of things. I was like, what do you want for this? He's like, this is a trade room only. You could offer me $1 million for that game. I would not take it. And I was like, okay, so what do we trade? He's like, well, take whatever you want. And then when you get back, you just start sending me stuff. And once I deem that like good enough, we'll just call it there. And I was like, hell no. like what kind of weird, like that's not how transactions work. That's like a mafioso squeeze. Like at that point, that's just weird. So ultimately we walked away getting absolutely nothing because I just couldn't believe how weird the policies in that place were. And to be fair, my friend had warned me about that. He's like, yeah, he's kind of crazy. And my buddy at Toy Rat kind of said the same thing. He's like, the problem with that trades room, he's like, it's all just garbage because he's got the windows up all the time. So he's like, half that stuff's like sun faded, damaged. He has no idea what's really in there. He doesn't test anything. He's just a guy who like hoards basically, and then just pretends like it's a store when he doesn't really need to sell anything because he comes from some serious money. So he doesn't really care if it stays open or not.
Do you know, is it still there?
I have not looked in years. I could potentially find that out, but I don't want to drop the dude's name. But anyway, yeah, that was definitely one of the weirdest.
I like the difference between Adam and me is like, Adam's like, I don't want to tell the guy's name, and I don't want to like tell the guy's store in case he's still there. I'm like, fuck 8-bit and up games. Fuck that guy Marcus with the dreadlocks. Don't go there.
Fair enough. But anyway, yeah, so that would be my worst stores that I can remember.
You notice how we spent more time talking about the bad than we did the good?
That's drama sells. What can I say? But anyway, so sorry, Abdullah, we just kind of kept you there in silence for a while, but thank you.
Completely fine. Don't worry about it. It's
Thank
actually
you very
very
much.
fun to know about those experiences. I want to go to all these stores, especially the bad ones.
No, you don't. So, all right, thank you, Abdullah, for joining us. Thank you, Chuck, for that subject, even though you didn't bother to respond to my text. I'll message you later. Also, we're going to do a round of shout-outs here, so the following people get shout-outs. Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Paul Lewis, and Trey Wagner. That's Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Paul Lewis, and Trey Wagner. These are all Patreon backers that get shout-outs. You can subscribe at any time to get shout-outs, pick subjects, and even be on the podcast. And again, thank you, Abdullah, for joining us. So, Joseph, you wanted to talk about genres of games that we've gotten into as adults that we weren't really super into as kids. Because this is your subject, do you want to lead this off with some specific examples?
Yeah, I guess that would probably make the most sense. So, as a kid, like, I was never really able to get into, like, real-time strategy games and stuff like that, or even, like, 4X games in general. Like, I played Civ as a kid, but usually it would be like, okay, I played Civ, cool, I beat the game once, and that was it, and I never touch it again. And then, like, in the last 3 years, when I got Civ 6... and then later on Stellaris, I basically dumped so many hours into those games. Now, it's not quite a real-time strategy game, but it's the closest analog to Stellaris I could come up with at the moment, where it would be a genre that I wasn't really able to get into as a kid, because I didn't know the grand strategy / 4X, what a 4X game was besides Civ when I was a kid. So, it was like... But I do remember, trying to play StarCraft and getting, 3 missions, and I was just like, no, I got it, no. Which sucked, because my friend got me StarCraft for my birthday, and he was really into it, so... But I really couldn't get into it, though, so that kind of sucked.
You know, this is kind of hard to answer, because and I'm sure Rob would agree with this, gaming really evolved substantially from the time when we were kids. So, there are genres that were around then, but the way the games function were totally different. For example, I think any one of us could probably get into some version of a first-person shooter now. There's a million of them. But I would argue that when I was a kid, all you really had was like Doom. And I didn't like Doom. But that's just because like that Doom Wolfenstein style of gameplay really just wasn't that appealing to me. Although ironically, I like those particular games a little bit more now. But I don't think it's that type of thing where I think a lot of the genre has completely evolved so much that it's like hard to compare them to that version of it when we were kids. Same with like racing games. Like I wasn't a big fan of 2D era racing games for the most part, but I think 3D ones are a lot more interesting. I don't think that has a whole lot to do with my taste so much as that the games just kind of evolved and became completely different. But on the flip side, there are games I just enjoyed more based on my early development, that type of genre, like platformers, that type of thing. I vastly enjoy more of the relics, and I don't really find any of the more modern retro-themed platformers to be anywhere near as exciting as the kind of stuff that a Sonic or a Mario in their heyday would give you. But I don't know. I don't know. Like, if you're saying like, hey, did I used to hate turn-based RPGs and now I love them? No. It's more like my tastes have only slightly been refined based on the technology around them. But like the core elements of what I liked and didn't like seem to still be basically prevalent, with one exception might be puzzle games. I think when I was a kid, I really just didn't have the patience for them, and now I do.
Yeah, there's that too for me. Now that I think about it.
But outside of that, I don't really know. Like, I think I was always fairly consistent. It's just that, like I said, what changed more was the technology and the ability to enjoy it on that basis, at least for me.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely like see where you're coming from on that. And like when it comes to puzzle games, yeah, that's like the one example I could think of where, as a kid, I was just like, I don't get this. I don't understand. I don't want to play this with, like, say, Tetris or like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. And then with Puyo Puyo Tetris, I then dumped like 500 hours into it, and like. Mm-hmm. And that's not a case of technology catching up, because Tetris is still Tetris, and Puyo is still Puyo. I mean, yeah, there have been slight rule changes between Mean Bean Machine and then the later one. Well, the one that became Mean Bean Machine and then the later ones, and then Tetris added the whole piece mechanic. But like other than that, the games are basically still the same, generally. It's not like they play differently.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key, and this is where it gets difficult, is you'd have to find a game you played a lot or tried to play a lot as a kid and did not like, yet still have and now like the exact same game as an adult. And I think the closest to that would be something like a Tetris, where as a kid I wouldn't have necessarily enjoyed it, but as an adult I probably do. But that's me. Rob?
So this might sound kind of controversial to gamers or retro game collectors that have such a visceral hatred of these games for what they used to be. And I had that too. But a game style that has kind of grown on me, especially with their modern iterations and interpretations on the style, is FMV, or full motion video games.
So, not where I thought you were going, but all right.
Yeah, same here.
So, back in the 90s, I had a JVC XI, which was a Sega Genesis and Sega CD combo. So, I remember going to Toys R Us with my parents, and I had just gotten this. My mom was working at JVC at the time, so she came home with it. So, I already had a bunch of Genesis games, because I already had a Genesis, but I'm like, I can't wait to play Sega CD games. And I remember distinctly being at Toys R Us and looking at the tickets for the games, and I remember looking at the kind of the cover art for the games, and I see things like Sonic CD, or even something like Star Wars Rebel Assault, or yes, anything like that. I remember seeing those games, and I'm like, my first instinct was go to Sonic CD, because I already had Sonic 2 and I had Sonic 3. And I'm like, oh, there's a new Sonic game. I want to play that. I remember my mom saying, like, oh, well, you already have Sonic game, so why don't you try something new? So I remember getting Ground Zero Texas. I remember getting... What was that? Was there like a basketball?
Scottie Pippen's thing?
Yeah, was it the Scottie Pippen? It might have been Scottie Pippen.
There is a Scottie Pippen one, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember getting that.
Slam City or whatever.
Slam City, yeah, something like yeah. So I remember getting that. It was a basketball game, and I got that, and I got fucking Ground Zero Texas. And I remember going home and being like, this fucking sucks. And I never bought another game for the Sega CD until, 20 years later, or whenever I started collecting Sega CD games as an adult and as a collector. And I knew better and what games to avoid. So, I can't even say that I got Night Trap. At least Night Trap would be fucking memorable.
You know what's really sad about that is if you had ended up with Sonic CD and maybe like Terminator, you might have thought Sega CD was like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But you get like one crap game or two crap games
I
and
look
you're
at
done.
this. I look at this. I'm like, oh, what's this Snatcher game? What's this KO Flying Squadron? Oh, this looks really stupid. I'm gonna get fucking Ground Zero Texas and Slam City fucking Scottie Pippen basketball.
dude, you're lucky if you can get 5 minutes of entertainment out of those. Like
they're really bad. And I even as an adult, I rebought Ground Zero Texas because I'm like, I like B horror movies, and I've even come to appreciate something like Night Trap in the same way somebody would appreciate something like Plan 9 from Outer Space or fucking The Room. It's just like a piece of artistic garbage, yeah. So and it still sucks. But, so, going back to my original thought is that FMV games today that are being released kind of take some really interesting ideas and do cool things with it. So I actually have a few of them. There have been a few that have been released through things like Limited Run. Ones that come to mind are... I don't even know how you would pronounce this. Would Simulacra or something? It's a cool game where it's like you actually use your cell phone as the controller in the game, and it's like a found phone horror game. There's another one called Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker, which was pretty good. There's one I've been playing on the Switch recently called She Sees Red, which is more like an interactive movie. And there's even one which, like, I bought on just morbid curiosity, and I actually really enjoyed it. Me and my wife actually sat down one night and played it. A game called 5 Dates, which was also a limited run release, and it's a interactive romantic comedy. And yeah, there's something different because back in the day, when you got a full motion video game, there was the assumption that that's the way video games might be going forward. It's like you're no longer getting pixel art. You don't need it anymore. You have full motion video. So, like, objectively, you could say that the graphics in Slam City with Scottie Pippen were better than something like NBA Jam because they were more realistic. And you're like, fuck, I hate the future. I want to stay in the past. And we've learned that was more of like a phase. An
abuse of a gimmick.
Yeah, abuse of a gimmick or a phase that the industry was...
that didn't work out.
Exactly. So now you're able to do things like a Simulacra or She Sees Red or Dr. Decker with FMV to do something different and like use it in an interesting way. Namely, horror games, survival horror really works well with FMV because it's like you're watching a scary movie with your friends and you're able to like interact with it. And I think that's the idea behind a game like Night Trap. Yes, but the execution was fucking terrible in Night Trap, and I highly so it's like it's gotten better since then, and I honestly recommend, like, a lot of these games are super cheap. They're on the Switch, they're on the PS4, whatever. Like, try them out. Like, you might get something cool.
I thought we were going to get more mileage out of this topic then.
Don't worry, because our next one is going to take us an eternity. Thank you, Joseph, for that particular subject, and we'll move on to our next subject, which comes from a backer. His name is Oliver Clare, who is in my Discord. He is our resident Irish person, and believe me, he would laugh at that. He has you remember Rob? He's actually been on this podcast like once or twice. And he's had a couple of subjects every time. He has a tendency to want us to talk for 4 hours. So we're going to try and not do that. But what he wanted us to do in this case, his original subject is I had to talk him out of this because, like, dude, you're not paying enough for this. He wanted us to rank every single console ever produced. Like, all three of us talk about each one. And I was like, dude, it would take a year. Like, we don't have the time.
Let's do it on the live stream or something like that.
So we ended up drawing it back down. What we're going to do instead is we're going to rank the 9 console generations, and you can rank them between S tier and F tier. F meaning the worst, S meaning the best, and then an A, B, C, D to F. So yeah, we'll just start with the first gen and move our way up to the current one. Basically, give a ranking, justify your reasoning, and we'll just kind of eventually decide, or hopefully settle on, what we think the best generation is, just on that basis. How does that sound, everybody?
Did you say it's going to include like S tier, like God tier, or are we stopping at A?
S tier is we're including S, which is God tier. Yes. So what I'm going to do, and I apologize if you guys hear clicking, is I'm going to keep a record of everybody's answers. That way we can kind of tabulate in some way at the end, just in raw numbers. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I apologize because you're going to hear clicky keyboarding at some points.
Clicky.
But clicky. Okay. All right. Now, who wants to start?
I'll take it. So, are we going generation by generation?
First,
just
talk about the first generation. Actually, this is how we should do this as a formula. Rob will introduce each generation, talk about it very generally, what it was like, and then just say overall what you would personally rate it and why.
Yes. Okay, so first generation is from 1971 to 1976, roughly, and is really the Magnavox Odyssey and Pong clones aplenty. From the historical standpoint, I'm inclined to give it a higher grade than it probably deserves, just because I'm very invested in that generation and that its history with Ralph Baer and the formation of Atari. But I will go ahead and give that I'll give it a D.
Rob gives stuff the D. Got it. Yeah,
I'm just gonna answer D to everything.
Pretty much the same reasoning. It's as Rob pointed out. There's really only one system in this entire generation, which is the Magnavox Odyssey. Every other single platform in there is a Pong clone. The only ones that are even worth noting, in my opinion, is like Nintendo made a couple. So it's like, oh, cool, Nintendo made one. Atari made a couple. Cool, Atari made some. So you can like technically include them. But overall, unless you just like really fucking love Pong, there is not much to do in this generation. And I know that might be disrespectful to the people of Elder that created all this and the history. I understand the significance of it. But the reason you've never seen me do a first-gen recap is because it could only be 2 videos. One would be on the Odyssey, and one would be on everything else.
By the way, Adam, if you're going to do it, you should do it this year. It's the 50th anniversary. 50th anniversary of console games. Come on.
Okay. I'm on it.
Adam.
All right. But anyway, and I appreciate that it had to start somewhere. But the NBA preseason has to start somewhere too. That doesn't make it interesting. So I have to give this I have to give it an F. I'm sorry. Like, if we're just going to look at it objectively from a distance, it does not hold up worth a damn.
I agree. Yeah.
But you didn't. You gave it the D.
Yeah, because
I effed it. You gave it the D.
I'm the historian, man. I gotta give it.
You gave it the D. I effed it. Let's put it that way. Okay. Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Adam on this one. It belongs in F tier for the exact same reasons. Like, yeah, it's important because with how it was kind of the start of video games in general, at least home video game stuff. But like, other than that, like, it doesn't hold up. It's literally just Pong and whatever was on the Odyssey. Like,
exactly.
Like, and the Odyssey didn't even have like swappable games really. It just had all of it like built in, and was using like different terminators on it. It wasn't even like a game console like we think of it now, where you plug a game in and then you're playing the game that's on the card. Really.
Yeah. Did have the first light gun though.
That is true. It did have that, but even still belongs in F tier.
All right, so I guess by default we would agree. Actually, let's add a little extra bonus to this. We'll name our favorite console of that generation. I think we'll all just have to by default say the Odyssey for this one, right?
It's the only one that's even remotely.
It's the only exactly. Okay, so the Odyssey wins.
Excuse me, I'm going to go with the Coleco Telstar Arcade. Yeah,
no, you're not. But you liar. Okay, so we'll just move on. All right, so the second generation, Rob, kick it off.
Second generation starts with the Fairchild Channel F in 1976 and really extends until the start of the great video game crash of 1983, encompassing such consoles as the Atari 2600, the non-Tommy Tallarico and Television, and the mighty Vectrex.
Okay.
So,
we're waiting on your...
Am I still going first? Okay.
Yeah, you're always going first. We're doing this in a historian. Yeah.
I'm going to say... I'm going to give this a C.
Okay.
I think there is a ton of trash in this generation. More bad than good, but it is an absolutely fascinating time in video game history to learn about. I think that some of the games in there, these arcade games that are really getting ported to consoles, your Space Invaders, your Asteroids, your Galagas, your Donkey Kongs and Pac-Mans, these games were so revolutionary and important that they're still getting new games made from them. So, and if you show somebody an Atari controller, they can identify it, even if they're like a modern console gamer that's never played anything newer than a Wii. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's an Atari controller." It's a very recognizable era in games.
Okay. So I have to give it a D. I'm going to give it the D. Because basically, to me, the second generation is to video games what M. Night Shyamalan is to movies. And the, A Sixth Sense is the Atari 2600. It wowed everybody. Everybody was like, whoa, this is really cool. Then he went off the rails and made Lady in the Water and The Village and all that other shit. That whole generation is just a bunch of just trash for the most part. Trash I somewhat respect, mind you. But trash that I just, like, ultimately almost killed the entire industry. And very little of it is replayable today. I mean, there are people that are still around, that are in the gaming community, people like your Brett Weiss, what's up, man, who love their ColecoVisions and their Intellivisions, and some of that stuff individually has merits, but on the whole, I find this generation about interesting in the way that you find the first generation interesting. It contributed a lot to the history, and I find that more interesting than the actual game content itself. But that said, the Atari 2600 is an amazing game console on its own, but it's surrounded by all these other things that are pretty bad for the most part. And again, like the M. Night Shyamalan comparison, he made one really good movie and just a pile of trash around him.
I'm actually pretty torn between C and D myself for both of the reasons you said. On one hand, like, leaning towards at least B and C, like, it is important historically, and this is kind of where, like, the modern conception of what a video game is, or at least what it was, kind of started. At the same time, Adam does have a point that, at least here in the US, it almost, completely killed video games before they really started. So it's like, I'm not entirely sure where to put it. Can I put it somewhere between D and C tier? Or is that against the rules?
No, you have to have a letter.
I have to have a letter.
I'm sorry, man. We got to draw borders somewhere.
I'm gonna go ahead and then put it in D tier then.
Fuck.
All right.
Damn it, come on.
It's all right. Rob, what's your favorite console from that generation?
Vectrex.
All right. Mine is the 2600, as mentioned before. And Joseph?
Also the 2600 by default, as that's the only one that I've actually played.
All right. That sort of counts. We'll go with it.
You need to play Vectrex.
Vectrex is cool. It is by far the most unique console in that generation. I give it bonus points for that. But is it enough to give it the C? I don't think so.
Yes.
Well, if my local game stores ever get one in again, maybe I'll buy one now that I would have the money to
better start saving now.
Third generation. Rob, take it away.
Third generation starts in 1983. On the same day, the SG-1000 from Sega and the Famicom, we know it as the NES, were released in Japan. And
I think it was July 13th, 1983.
Yes.
I think.
And, summer 1983, definitely. And includes game systems like the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Sega Master System, and the Atari 7800. This might be my first controversial one. I'm going to put it in the same tier as the second gen. I'm going to put it in C.
Okay.
Because even though I personally like the Master System, this generation is a generation of one console. Let's be honest. It's a generation of the NES. But can the NES alone shoulder the entire generation and drag it further up the rankings? There are some incredible games on the NES, but I have little to no nostalgia for it, even though it was part of my life. I never really owned one myself, but I played it at every single friend's house. And I knew what an NES was. I know what the games are. And I think it's great. I think it's a great system, but I'm putting it on C tier.
You know what? I actually completely agree. Pretty much verbatim. Like, I'm giving it the C. It is exactly that reason. Like, I prefer the Master System, but if I sit there and I think, like, what do I play on the Master System? The answer is nothing. But what do I play on the NES? The answer is also nothing. Because I would argue that the best game of that entire generation is Super Mario Brothers 3, and I got news for you. The 16-bit version is better. So, like, unless you grew up with it at exactly the right time, which admittedly Rob and I did not. We need to be very clear about this, and it's obviously going to reflect in our rankings. It's just, we don't have nostalgia for it except for, like, selective nostalgia. Like, I'm more nostalgic about the fact that I bought it later, or that I played the NES at my cousin's house a little bit here and there, as we kind of mentioned earlier. But it doesn't... and I legitimately think it wasn't actually that good of a generation. It was just that the NES was so fresh and different for its time, but it didn't have that competitive edge against... Let's face it, as you pointed out, it's a system of one. Sega, at least in North America, let's be very clear about this. In North America, Sega and Atari were essentially irrelevant in that generation. And that meant Nintendo could make garbage after garbage after garbage, and people would buy it to the point where they had to, every company had to relicense and have new company. Like Konami had Ultra, so they could make 5 more games per year. And it would always be like movie license games that were terrible. Very few games from that era are actually good, because the truth is they didn't really need to be. You get a couple of your heavy hitters, your Zeldas and stuff like from Nintendo, as is still kind of Nintendo's model. But on the whole, it's a handful of games across an entire generation that I think people actually fondly remember it for.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us would agree it's like which system has better games, the Atari 2600 or the NES. I think all of us would say the NES. But the difference between the second and third gen, at least in my opinion, the second gen offerings from companies like GCE and the Vectrex and the ColecoVision and the Intellivision, and even stuff like the 5200 or the Magnavox Odyssey 2. There's more interesting stuff on those systems than there are on the 7800, and even the Master System, especially in America.
Master System in Europe is a different story, though, and
Yes.
I want to be very clear to our European viewers. We know that it's a very different story over there. Master System, particularly in the UK, absolutely dominated. We know. We're just going off our own... Yeah. Oh, where it's still actually active. So we know, guys. We know, but we're just going off our own personal experiences.
I mean, the only Master System games that I have are from Europe.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's the three Sonic games, and I've got Master of Darkness, which is a Castlevania clone. That's it.
There's more than 3 Sonic games.
Well, the platformers, your 1, 2, and Chaos, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, sorry, Joseph?
I'm gonna have to put this in C tier too.
All right.
How old are you, Joseph? By the way, I'm curious.
I am 34.
I
grew up with an NES. I got an NES when I was 3 years old, but then I got a Genesis when I was 5.
Yeah. So you're 1 year younger than Adam and I. So
pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Rob, your favorite system from that generation?
Master System.
Is that actually your answer?
Yeah, I find it more interesting, honestly.
You know what? I know it's going to sound like bias, but I actually totally agree with him. I said it before. Like, the NES, I think, is possibly the most overrated console ever made because people remember it fondly for a handful of games, which admittedly are quite good, but the majority of the stuff on that system is garbage. Whereas Master System, I feel like, was vastly more interesting. It's just that nobody ever really played it outside of Europe. Well, and again, Brazil. But if you actually like kind of dig deep into it, you'll realize like, oh, so like every game that existed on NES had a better version on Master System, like Ghostbusters being a great example of that and stuff like that. So yeah, I would actually give it to Master System. But am I going to sit there and be like, dude, we got to play some Master System? Probably never. No. How about you, Joseph?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but yeah, Master System.
Wow.
We are weirdos.
When I think about when I think of what 8-bit wise I actually go back and play most of the time, unless if I'm like on a game club Discord and then we're doing a game club thing that has an NES game. Like, if I'm playing an 8-bit game, chances are I'm grabbing Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 for Master System off the shelf and playing that. So
I cannot wait to see the YouTube comments. Absolutely fucking destroying us for picking the Master System over the NES.
I think it's more likely. I like 7800. Bye.
Yeah.
All right.
I like Turtles. Anyway. I like the 7800.
That's right. Okay. Fourth gen. Go, Rob.
Fourth gen starts in 1987 with the release of the PC Engine. We know it as the TurboGrafx 16 in America. It is the 16-bit generation, the generation of the console wars between the Super NES, the Super Famicom, and the Mega Drive / Genesis. Also includes things like the Neo Geo AES and the Neo Geo CD, and some weird ones like the what was that one? FM Towns Marty that was 5th gen, right?
That was 5th gen.
Yeah, what was that one in Europe? That was the Amstrad?
Amstrad GX 4000. That was 3rd gen.
That was 3rd gen? Holy shit, I'm off tonight. Yeah, so anyway, those are your big ones. And I am a born and bred Sega kid, and Genesis does what Nintendo don't. So I'm going with the Sega Genesis.
I was actually asking what your tier was.
Oh. S.
Okay.
S tier. This is God tier. Because even though I say Sega Genesis is my favorite console of that generation, every single console in that generation is fucking phenomenal. the AES, which is the most powerful system in the generation, is phenomenal. Arcade perfect ports. The Genesis arcade games, excellent shoot 'em ups, platformers. It's fantastic. The Super Nintendo, it's the fucking Super Nintendo. It's the NES, but better in every way, shape, or form. And even something like the TurboGrafx, this dark horse, amazing console that nobody played, and everybody
outside of Japan,
but now everybody's waking up and saying, "Holy shit! There's so much good stuff on here, and you can't find any of the games for cheap anymore." That shows how jam-packed this generation is. Every single console is phenomenal.
So, yeah, this generation is fascinating. I mean, granted, Rob and I are slightly biased because I think we both came into this generation at that age where that would make the most impact on us. But this was truly a fascinating generation because by this point in time, you had legitimate competition between dedicated game manufacturers. And there were no bells and whistles, like you couldn't have, we're going to have our Game Pass, we're going to have Netflix integration, we're going to have the you had to have
although both games. Although Sega and Nintendo both tried to do something like that.
Sega was slightly more successful with the Sega channel, but even that, it was never like that's why anybody really got one. My point is simply that the whole generation was essentially defined by the fact that you had to have the best games to win. That was it. That was the only way it was ever going to work. And so when you have that kind of level of competition, that's going to produce some really good content. However, while I am giving it, of course, the S tier, that's actually not why. The reason we're giving it the S tier is because it's also the generation that gave us the CDI.
I knew there was something that I was missing in the generation.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be slightly contrary here, and I'm going to give it A tier instead of S tier. Like, okay. Nostalgia-wise, I do recognize that I probably should be giving it the S tier, but when I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, the games are great and everything, and I'm not. Well, a lot of the games are great. There was still a bunch of crap, but that's the same no matter what generation you're in. But I'm going to reserve S for where I think, like, gaming kind of basically peaked, as it will, and I don't think 16 gen is quite the top of it just yet.
Okay, so. That is fair. Rob, you said your favorite from this generation is the Genesis?
Genesis.
Now, I have a question for the audience, meaning the two of you, because no one else can respond to us. If you say the Genesis, does that automatically include the 32X and Sega CD library or not?
No.
I would say the 32X is arguably a 5th gen, at least in my opinion. Sega CD, if it does include the 32X and Sega CD, even better.
But that's what I'm asking. This is the judges. Does it include? If I say Genesis, do you include those or not?
I'm going to say yes. But even if I didn't include them, it would still not change my answer.
And Joseph, you're saying no.
Yeah, I'm saying no because you can make an argument that the Sega CD was possibly relevant enough, but the 32X was like there, and then Sega abandoned it like almost immediately. So like other than like Knuckles Chaotix on it, I can't think of a game on there that's like. Well, I mean, there are probably a couple of other good games or games people know about, but it just wasn't really enough to even meaningfully contribute.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to be the tiebreaker here. I'm gonna say then that the add-ons do not count as part of the overall console because they were ancillary. However, they don't function as dedicated consoles, obviously. But the reason I bring that up is because it changes my answer. If you include all three, then the Genesis is my favorite. If you do not, I have to give it to the Super Nintendo. I know, Rob, I can hear you crying from here.
You're just doing that because you don't want to agree with me.
Dude, we both
let's call a spade a spade.
I agreed with you on the fucking Master System.
He did.
Over the NES.
He did. I mean,
it's not a Sega bias. It's not a bias.
But Adam, I know you're gonna pick the fucking loopy for the next generation, and I gotta like get in my shot.
You are not. You are getting ahead, motherfucker. All right. I apologize for the language, Joseph, but Rob really brings out the worst in people. Now,
I grew up in New York for the first 19 years of my life.
Good.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
New York Day, yeah. All right. Okay, so Joseph, how about you?
The favorite console is a bit of a tricky part. Like, as far as like nostalgia goes, it would definitely be the Genesis all the way. But objectively, like, if I was ranking best console of the generation, I'm gonna have to edge it out towards the Super Nintendo, which kind of makes sense because they came out 2 years apart. But just thinking about like when I think back on like 16th gen, the 16-bit gen, I'm like, okay. So Genesis games that I really love to play on that: Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Knuckles. And then the nostalgia things like the first X-Men game was nostalgic for me. I had Echo as a kid, so if I could ever find a complete copy of that, I'd probably play that just for nostalgia's sake. And same with like Aladdin on the Genesis. But like with Super Nintendo, you have Super Mario, you have World, and then you have Super Mario All-Stars. You have Kirby's Dream Land 3, Yoshi's Island, Zelda, Super Metroid, F-Zero, and then I personally don't like the Donkey Kong Country games all that much, but you have 3 of those. And I didn't have the Super Nintendo as a kid, and when my first time actually playing Donkey Kong Country outside of being at my friend's house, I was playing it on the Retron 5 because I didn't have the console then, so that probably colored my impression of it with all that shitty input lag.
Okay. All right, we will move forward then. 5th generation. Rob, take it away.
5th generation is the 32 and 64-bit era, starting in 1993 with the release of the 3DO and the FM Towns Marty and the Amiga CD32. All of these, what Adam refers to as the graveyard consoles, but is most known for the big three: the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, and the Nintendo 64. And this is honestly the first one that's difficult for me to choose the console that I...
Well, we're on tier 5.
Yeah, and because I have a ton of nostalgia for this generation, in the form of the Nintendo 64. But if you're calling a spade, the Nintendo 64 is not a very good game console in terms of its library. When it's great, and when it's bad, and it's mostly mediocre in the middle. And I am going to put this... I'm going to put this on B tier.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Rob said it pretty well. It's got the ones that people remember it for, which I would argue is basically just the PS1 and the N64. And I cannot tell you how many comments I've seen over the years about those being the only two that even exist, when that's absurd. Saturn, Jaguar, 3DO, FM Towns Marty, which you referenced earlier.
People think that only the PlayStation and N64 exist. I mean, I could understand like not knowing about like the 3DO or even the Jaguar. But the Sega Saturn, I mean, how can you not know that exists?
Just be a YouTuber and make videos about this type of thing, and trust me, the comments will come. People will tell you that those are the only two that exist, because that's all they count, as if that means anything. Or even if they know, they don't. But there's also a lot that just straight up don't know about those, because people don't tend to go out of their way to research obscure things. And sadly, in North America, the Saturn is kind of an obscure thing at this point.
I guess that's true. We did grow up when this generation was around.
I mean, admittedly, famously on my own videos, I pointed out that I did not even know the Saturn existed until after the Dreamcast was defunct. Because
that's right. You did say that.
The Saturn just basically didn't exist here. So I get it. And not every person is going to pay as much attention to it as we are. But I guess where it bothers me is when people argue that those are the only two for real, just because they haven't heard of anything else. And then when you try to tell them that, they're like, oh, no, that doesn't count because none of that is real. It's like, okay. Anyway, that's just personal pet peeve. But the other consoles are like the FM Towns Marty, the Amiga C32, the PCFX, Bandai's, the Apple Pippin, of course, the best console ever, the Palladium, as well as the other best console ever, the Casio Loopy. Those two are obviously both S tier on their own, so they shouldn't even really count. But then, as you mentioned, there's 32X counts to an extent, 64DD counts to an extent, and even the Jaguar CD. It was a crazy-ass generation. That said, I agree with Rob's reasoning. I would actually give this a B. And the reason I would give it a B, despite it kind of being right in there as far as like when I was, a kid and I was gaming on a lot of this stuff, the truth is the vast majority of this content did not age well. Like, all jokes aside, none of us play the 64DD, the Jaguar CD, the 32X, the Loopy, the Pippin, the Palladium, the PCFX, the CD32, the FM Towns Marty, and probably very few of us play the Jaguar or the 3DO. I think it would ultimately come down to the Saturn, the PS1, and the N64. And I think of those three, I would argue only diehards play the Saturn at this point. I'd say almost anyone who's into the PS1, and of course there's a lot of them, have kind of moved on to playing remasters of those games. I don't think there's a whole lot of people who actually sit down and play it on a PS1 proper anymore. And as Rob pointed out with regards to the N64, it's kind of like the NES, where it has like 10 like legendary games and the majority of its library is terrible. Even though I love those 10 games for the most part, and there's some great PS1 games that I absolutely love, and there's some objectively phenomenal games on things like the Saturn. The truth is, most of it is just not as revisitable as, say, the fourth generation.
Yeah. Because, they're having to relearn how to make games.
Yeah. Essentially, yes. Rob, I didn't get your answer for your favorite console in that generation.
Fuck. Honestly, it's the nostalgia in me is going to say the N64. I never had a PlayStation.
Okay.
But, I've really come to love the Saturn. And I've bought more Saturn games than N64 games in probably the past 5 years.
Are you voting N64? That's all I need to know.
I'm going to say the Saturn.
Really?
I'm going to say the Saturn.
Okay. All right. One vote for Saturn.
2022, Rob says the Saturn.
Okay. It's funny because, my joke answer is obviously the Loopy. But the real answer, I look at it and I go, I think I have the most nostalgia berries on the N64. I want it to be the Sega Saturn. I really do. But if I'm completely and brutally honest, it's the PS1.
Wow, okay.
It's just got the most like balanced out content that you can actually go back and revisit if you want to. That's the big catch there, though, is that a lot of its best known games were remade later. Things like we talked about before, Resident Evil, but also things like Metal Gear Solid, things like Final Fantasy VII have all been essentially remade, and there's really no reason to play the original version. But since we deal exclusively pretty much in the nostalgia and the old versions, I got to give it to the PS1. And I'm sorry, Joseph, what is your ranking?
Until we started talking about this, I was going to say S, but now that I think about it, it's probably just A. Now I think about it, because you're right. A lot of the PS1 games, and even the N64 games and Saturn games, have not, quote, aged well, and they are hard to go back to. Like, I'll do it because, I'm on this podcast, but...
yeah,
but most people won't. So, and like you said, a lot of the games were also remade later, or ported late. Well, I guess ports don't technically count if it's just like PSN classics or stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely A tier. I wanted it to be. I was thinking it was going to be S tier. I think there's a different gen that has to take that slot. But this is the generation that, as I was growing up. Like, I was still a kid during this generation. I was like 10 or 11 when it started. But this was the generation that made me realize that, oh, video games aren't like a fad or a toy that I'm going to grow out of. This stuff could actually be considered art. I didn't like think about it in that way, like when I was first playing Final Fantasy VII, which is when this thought process kind of started to crystallize. But looking back, yeah, this is around the time that I was like, okay, yeah, video games can be art. I'm going to be doing this forever. So
Okay, and your favorite console?
PlayStation.
Okay, 2 votes for the PS1.
All
right, Rob, take it away.
I was really hoping that was going to be one where each of us had a different console that we liked.
It is interesting. Nobody voted for the N64.
Yeah.
I didn't have an N64 until like a couple of years ago. Same with the Saturn. So,
I mean, I had to break it down. The true answer should have been the Loopy. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like the stupid dog game. Yeah, that's the greatest game ever made. But other than that, it doesn't have anything. Okay, move on. 6th gen.
All right, so 6th generation. You know, most people say that it starts in 1998, but in reality, let's be honest, it starts 9/9/99 with the release of the Sega Dreamcast in North America. It is the era of more enhanced definition 3D. It's the era where the bits stop being measured and includes the Sega Dreamcast, the Nintendo GameCube, the Microsoft Xbox, the VM Labs Nuon, and the best-selling video game console of all time, the Sony PlayStation 2. And I am going to just get it out of the way and say this is another S. This is S tier.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why you would dispute that it doesn't start in 1998. It obviously does. That's when the Dreamcast came out. But that's in Japan, admittedly. But to be fair, yeah, the very end of 1998. Actually, where I thought you were going with that is all these people are like, well, the Dreamcast isn't really a 6th-gen console. Shut up. Just shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's not even like debatable just because it doesn't fit your idiotic opinion. And yes, opinions can be idiotic. But yes, that generation consists of 5 game consoles. I think the thing that's most interesting about it is kind of the beginning and endings that it has. It's the swan song of Sega. It was the last console they ever made, excluding the Sega Bina, of course. It was the introduction of the Xbox brand, which was the last time we would see someone new enter and actually be successful. And actually, to be technical, it is the last time we actually did see anybody new enter, because the other thing we have about it is, Rob pointed out, and you guys probably just might have misheard him there, VM Labs, a company you probably never heard of outside of the context of the Nuon, and you probably never even heard of the Nuon, was the last third-party attempt to try to get into the console market and fail. Because after that, no one else tried to do this anymore. But the VM Labs Nuon showed up 1 year before the original Xbox. It is possible, Rob, if you think about it, because we think of the Xbox now as such a standard of gaming, but Microsoft could have shown up and been like the Amiga CD32. It could have shown up and failed horribly, and no one would have ever bought it. It actually debatably did. If you think about it, it left the industry $4.4 billion in the red. And if it wasn't literally Microsoft backing it, no one would have kept pursuing that platform, right?
Yep.
But it's kind of interesting to think about. But aside from those two, no one else has ever seriously tried to get into the game console market ever since. You can't throw out things like the Ouya because they're not really consoles, or the Mattel Hyperscan or any of that garbage. Those things aren't real attempts at legitimate competition, and things like Stadia aren't even consoles. So I find it fascinating for a whole lot of reasons. But on top of that, it includes my favorite video game console of all time in the Sega Dreamcast. It includes the original Xbox, which is probably my 4th favorite console of all time. The GameCube, which might be like my 6th. It's obviously the PS2 is a legendary console. The only one that actually hurts the overall average is the new one, because it's just like, what is this like weird outlier in the middle there? that nobody even remembers. But yeah, I got to give it S tier because essentially every console in that generation is incredible.
Yep.
Yep, and this is what I'm going to go with for S tier as well.
Boom.
I don't want it to be because I definitely go back to PS1 stuff more than like PS2 or even GameCube stuff a lot of the time. But objectively, yeah, this is probably the better generation. This is where all the stuff I talked about for the fifth gen, like actually like fully crystallized, and I could actually like be like, okay, yeah, I could like as I was playing it, I could be like, okay, yeah, video games are art. Whereas I was starting to think that in fifth gen, even if I didn't really have the words to express it then, or at least the idea to express it. But this is when that actually crystallized and happened. It's also the first time it's actually the first time ever that I actually had more than one of the consoles in the generation while it was relevant. I had both a PS2 and a GameCube. And there was a lot of great games across both of those. And then, there were a couple of good games on the Xbox that I've heard about, but that I haven't really played a lot of, but...
Okay, so Rob, I'm assuming your answer is GameCube for your favorite?
Yeah, similar to you, my favorite video game console is in this generation as well, and it is the Nintendo GameCube by a country mile.
Sega Dreamcast, same. And how about you, Joseph?
I think I'm gonna go ahead and say that my favorite for this gen is actually the PS2.
Okay.
There we go. Finally, we all picked different
That was the
ones.
first generation where we've had a complete disagreement. Yeah. The irony is we all gave it the same ranking.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. Like, all the consoles were great. I mean, for the most part, I guess we can't really say much about the new one. Adam's the only one out of here of us that has one, and he can't even...
I have two, okay? I have two.
You do have two. Do you have a controller for one?
I have a new one as well, but I don't have a controller either.
Nobody has a controller for that thing.
Okay. So none of us have actually been able to play any of the games on the new one, so we can't...
Beyond just, like, clicking a little, yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the 7th generation. Rob, take it away.
7th generation starts in 2005, and it is the high-definition era, if you consider 720p high definition, which technically it is. And started with the Microsoft Xbox 360 and includes the Nintendo Wii and the Sony PlayStation 3. And I am going to call this... I'm going to say... I'm going to say B tier.
Okay.
For this.
You want to elaborate?
Yeah. I mean, despite the metric fuck ton of hatred for the Wii on this channel, I think the Wii's alright. The controller sucks, but there are a bunch of really good games on there. And Xbox 360 is one of my favorite consoles of all time. So many amazing memories of that. And the PS3 is started off weak, but finished really, really strong. And, yeah, I mean, this is really one of the last generations where physical media was the way you played the games from. There was digital games, of course, but, the discs were the way to play the games and read the games. It's still collectible. You can still find games for pretty good prices. 7th gen's excellent.
Okay, so it's interesting. I think if you had asked me this a couple years ago, I probably would have said A, but I'm actually going to drop it down to a B, and it's not exactly for the reason you expect. Now, I think the 360 is actually my 5th favorite game console of all time. It's an amazing video game console. When they function, by the way, that's key. The PS3, I think, is what hurts the grade a little bit. I love the PS3, and I don't want people to misunderstand me here. But the PS3's best games, especially the ones you point out towards the end, your Last of Us and all that sort of stuff that really kind of made it really good towards the end, Sony basically stole everything off that system and brought it over and upgraded it for the 8th generation. So there isn't a whole lot that's actually special left on it. Now, you can use that argument for other game consoles throughout history. I recognize that. And that even applies to the 360. A lot of its best stuff was eventually kind of stolen and plucked off of it. But that's kind of the problem overall, is the generation sunk because overall there's not a whole lot that's unique on it. The irony is the stuff with the most uniqueness on there is actually the Wii, because stuff is actually locked to that shit fuck controller. And I actually see the Wii is so bad that it costs like an entire letter on its own. Like, you debatably, I would have given this S tier at one point. The Wii exists, it's down to A tier. And over time, it's kind of flattened out to B tier, in my opinion, for that reason.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with B tier as well. I mean, for different reasons than Adam, because I don't hate the Wii. I mean, I don't play it anymore, but when I had one, I played it a lot. I love the PS3, and this is the first generation that I actually went out of my way to actually get everything that came out at the time. So I have a 360, had a PS3, had a Wii, had a PSP and a DS. So even including the handhelds, I had everything. This was in the beginning, this was the time where all of the console manufacturers actually still gave a shit about their back catalog and their history. So like there was backwards compatibility, at least in the beginning, for all of them for the previous gens. DLC and the ability to update games did come out, but in the beginning it wasn't like how it is like now, where it like feels like a lot of the time it's a way to get the game out before it's finished, or then just get more money out of people later for stuff that would have been in the base game originally and stuff like that. But that's the problem. The generation was so long that towards like the end of it, yeah, there were great games coming out, but like the actual business model of the industry was shifting to the point where it kind of started to, get basically got shitty. Like as far as like how at least the way how we perceive like how the business is run and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Don Matrick era. The Don Matrick era. Yeah, it's all Doritos and Mountain Dew. I know. I know exactly what you mean. It is funny, you brought up a really good point though that I appreciate, which is that generation, every single one of them started off by actually giving a shit about backwards compatibility, and they should get recognition for that. If I could give this a B+, I would, but I can't, so I have to keep it at a B. But I think for that alone, it gets like a half point that's purely ceremonial.
Yeah, in the alternate universe where the 7th gen was a normal length console gen, and we got the PS4 and Xbox One at the same time as we got the Wii U, 7th gen probably would have been either S or A. But we didn't get that timeline. So
the PS4 and the Xbox One only came out a year after the Wii U. So really? They weren't that. Oh yeah, that's right. They weren't that far apart. But I know what you're saying. Like if they had both come out in like 2010 or like instead of 2013, then it would have been different.
Yeah, for some reason I thought the Wii U was earlier.
No, 2012.
Yeah, no. To your point though, Adam, about the PS4 kind of stealing a lot of the PS3's best stuff, and arguably you could say that about the Xbox 360 as well. I could say that, honestly, about the PS2 to the PS3, because the games that I really liked on the PS2 were a lot of those exclusive platformers in games like the Sly Cooper games, the Jak and Daxter games, the Ratchet and Clank games, the God of War games, the Metal Gear Solid games.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you.
And all of them got better HD upgrades in compilations on the PS3.
Okay, the difference here is that policy, the one you're describing, has existed on like every generation. Like Sega did that, bringing the Sonic Genesis games to the Saturn on Sonic Jam. It's always been a thing. The difference was with the PS4, they basically just re-released one game at a time because they knew full well that basically there was an entire Xbox audience that didn't bother getting an Xbox One initially because of its debacle at the beginning, and were getting PS4s. Since the console was not backwards compatible, they were just re-releasing enhanced versions only slightly of, say, The Last of Us, God of War 3. They were essentially doing just up-resed ports for an entirely new audience as opposed to, like, collections. That's what I mean when I say that. They basically they cherry-picked, kind of the way almost like the Switch is doing with the Wii U now. where it's just kind of taking a handful of its like best known stuff, upgrading it a bit, adding a little more content, and calling it a new game. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But I think that practice, unfortunately, kind of hurts that generation over time. But anyway, what is your favorite console of that generation?
Now, I'm actually curious. Can we like all say it at the same time on 3? Because I think we're all going to pick the same thing.
Okay. Count it down.
All right. So, like our intro, 3, 2, 1, and then say.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So 3, 2, 1. Xbox 360.
Xbox 360.
Oh, God damn it, Joseph.
What did he say?
I said PS3.
See, that's why we don't do that, Rob.
God damn it.
You just
Somebody
ruined the
really
show.
likes The Last of Us.
Then you should like the PS4.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right. 8th gen. Go for it.
All right. 8th gen starts in... What was that, 2012?
2012. 10 years ago, buddy. 10 years ago.
Jesus Christ. 2012 with the launch of the Nintendo Wii U, and includes the uncontroversially the PS4 and the Xbox One and their 3 iterations, and controversially but correctly the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch.
Boom! He said it. The man said it, and he's right.
It's an 8th gen, and I'm calling this an A tier. Because despite a lot of the problems with microtransactions and DLC and stuff, the games are just fucking fantastic. And, yeah. I played this. Yeah. I played this generation probably still more than any other right now.
So, obviously we're all in agreement. Switch is objectively, this is not an opinion, it is objectively an 8th gen console based on the time of its release, based on the technology on board, based on the competition it was designed to go against. There is no argument for the fact that it is a 9th gen console, unless you just don't know your history. The only good, quote unquote good, argument I've ever heard of people saying like, well, Wii U is the 8th gen, so it has to be 9th. No. History is littered with companies that did multiple consoles in the same generation. Sega did it, Atari did it, SNK did it, Nintendo did it. It's done. It's an 8th gen console. You can argue maybe that it's a portable and not really a console. That's a different discussion. But it is, if you're calling it a console, it's an 8th gen console. That said, the other asterisk with this means this is the first generation on our list that is still active at the time we're talking about it. So opinions can evolve and change, although I would say this one's a little easier to rank. I would actually also give this an A tier. It's weird. Until we sat here and did this, I just assumed the 7th gen was going to outrank the 8th gen in my opinion. But as I sit here and I think about it, I'm like, no, because a lot of what actually hurt my 7th gen ranking is exactly the thing that makes the 8th gen better. Meaning, it's taking a lot of the best games of that era, upgrading them and essentially re-releasing them, but also giving you a lot of unique and exclusive and special experiences, particularly in the Wii U, in my opinion, which eventually evolved into the Switch, that I just think like, yeah, this is a very playable, very fun generation of gaming, so I give it an A.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this one a B as well.
A B, okay.
Yeah, because while what you said is true, there are a bunch of unique games on it that are in this generation that are great. The downsides, like with the whole microtransactions, loot boxes, and further DLC stuff that made me not as happy with the 7th generation as I thought I would have been, just got worse here. And while the Wii U and Switch are fantastic consoles, don't necessarily do that anywhere near as much. Well, the Wii U didn't. The Switch, it has that same stuff, but those two can't really elevate the bad sides of the other two themselves, so it's still kind of stuck in B tier. I was actually thinking I was going to put this in C, but no. I mean, the games that came out for 8th gen are still coming out for 8th gen, there's still a bunch of great stuff, so I can't put it down as far down C as I initially thought I was going to.
You do present a very good point, and it's kind of a separate discussion, because as I sit here and I rank them, I also think about how much better they are when they're hacked, particularly things like the Wii U, because once they're hacked, you don't have to deal with the problems you're describing.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, and
that's
you're absolutely
discussion.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
I'm just,
but I've got
stock vanilla.
I know, and it's a very valid point, and so it's kind of interesting. It doesn't change my score because the only one of these that I have a hacked one of is a Wii U. But you're absolutely right that down the road, it probably will hurt their overall credibility. But the other thing is, particularly with the PS4 and the Xbox One, they don't really function all that well on their own because they're basically entirely compatible with the 9th gen, which is a different debate. But for the moment, I would give it an A. But I can almost guarantee you that ranking, if you were to ask me in 10 years from now, would probably fall off quite a bit. But again, like I said, warning, this is still an active generation. So, whatever. So Rob, what is your favorite from this generation?
I'm going to go with the Switch.
Okay.
The Switch takes all of the best aspects of the Wii U. It takes all of its best games. It improves them and adds upon it. And it's been my constant travel companion. I literally just upgraded to an OLED Switch, and hot damn, that screen is fucking nice.
It is.
And like, holy fuck, it's so much nicer. And it is my fastest growing collection personally. I think it's an indie darling. The amount and level of indie games on this makes it like one of the best consoles to play those types of games on, and it is for the most part kind of unmolested by the excessive DLC and microtransactions and loot boxes. Yes, there is DLC. But for the most part, Nintendo does an excellent job of curating that and making sure that any extra money that you spend is going to be fucking worth it. And you're going to get a lot for your bang for your buck. And especially if you're talking about companies like Limited Run and the indie games that are releasing on it, the games are on the fucking cartridges. Like,
yeah,
it's not a download code for a fucking patch. For the most part, yes, there are some that does that, but I think it's great.
Before I give my answer, I'd like to hear Joseph's.
Switch
Definitely
as well.
Switch.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my case, like once I got my first Switch, it's like I was defaulting to buying get multi-plat games on the Switch just because I had the option of moving between places with the same game, and then like
even if they're downgrades, like that's the amazing thing.
It's like I could bring my Switch with me to work, play during lunch, come back home, and be playing the same game on my TV. And then, at the time, I was possibly going like, okay, if I go visit my parents for whatever reason, they're in New York at the time, I'm in Virginia, I'll take the Switch with me and be playing the same thing I'd be playing at home.
Yeah.
That's tapered off a bit now that I don't do so much traveling anymore. Like between this last 2 years and my parents moving down to Virginia, it stopped being that much that I would automatically default to the Switch version. But compared to like the PS4 that I have, I didn't buy 3 variants of the PS4. I bought 3 Switches over the years. So
okay. All right. This is really hard for me because I literally look at all 4 and want to rank each one of them. Like, when the PS4 dropped, like, that was my console of choice. Like, that's what I was doing everything on. I kind of hated the Xbox One initially for the same reason everybody did. And I really loved it. Although, over time, Xbox kind of won me over. And I spent, once they upgraded to the S and eventually the X and everything, it just became kind of a better experience. But if we're completely honest, both the PS4 and Xbox One, unless you just like fucking love the Kinect, are totally pointless given what comes after them because they completely support like all the same content, and especially the Xbox is like the exact same ecosystem, so it's doesn't it's kind of even hard to include. So then you look over at Nintendo, everything you guys are saying about the Switch is completely correct. I can't argue against any of it, but I'm going to shock the world here. I think I have to go with the Wii U.
You fucking hipster!
No, I'm being.
I mean, we're talking favorites. We're not talking objectively the best.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to break it down and explain it as such. Because if I'm completely honest, I don't know what it is about the Switch. Like, I do not disagree with anything you guys are saying about it. Not a goddamn thing. But I just don't get it. Like, I just don't have the same kind of fun with it. Whereas for some reason I could fire up the Wii U and have a blast, even if it's not this, even if it's like an inferior version of the same game that exists on the Switch. And I don't know how to explain that. There's just something about the Wii U that's like so bizarre that I love and I get into. Now I admit I have a hacked one, but even before that, I actually do own all of the original discs. Like, I have a complete Wii U set. Every game across the planet, I have them all. And I don't know what it is. Something about the Wii U I just think is amazing, which you have to appreciate the irony from someone who thinks the Wii is one of the worst things ever created by humans.
Honestly, but I wouldn't call that irony. That's probably the explanation right there. I mean, the fact that you hated the Wii so much and then Nintendo basically made a console that could basically be described as, especially for Adam Koralik, I mean, of course you're going to latch onto that one.
I guess. But I ended up loving it more than I thought I would, and I could actually still sit there and play it. And the Switch, I don't know. It's like I feel like overwhelmed by the Switch because it has so much on it. You kind of go like, where the fuck do I even start? That's just how it feels to me at times. But, you know, I like I said, I do not disagree with anything you guys said about it. So I think I have to give like an asterisk default win to the Wii U.
I think you're really coming at this, and you said it in videos too, that this overwhelming feeling in regards to the Switch is coming from your collectionist and completionist nature.
No doubt.
You said I'm going to stop buying Switch games because there's too many Switch games, even though the Switch games are amazing. Like.
Wow. Because I didn't stop buying Switch games. I just stopped buying tons of them.
No,
you stopped buying Switch games just to buy Switch games for the collection. Now you're just buying Switch games you want to play.
Yes,
but the difference is, it's like you still buy a lot of stuff you buy more stuff for the PS4 and the Xbox One, like at least according to your playloads.
That is correct.
I mean,
yes.
I think your bias in wanting a complete collection, because that's the goal of most of your collecting. Yeah.
No. I openly do not want a complete Switch collection. In fact, the Wii U is the only complete Nintendo set that I even own. It's just not. I honestly, with the Switch, I kind of look at it the same way I did the PS3. I really just pick up the exclusives. That's like all I really want it for. Because if there's a modern game that comes out, the Switch version is going to be the inferior version. But you also have to remember, I'm someone that does not value portability in a game at all.
There's also that.
So, to me, it's only going to be useful if I'm playing it as a home console. So I have no reason to play the home console version of a watered-down game available in 4K on the Xbox Series X. So, if I want that home Nintendo experience, it's great. But then it's only down to the same things that applied to, like, the N64, which was just the handful of, like, Nintendo-specific exclusive titles that are special to me. Because we also exist in a time where there's not a whole lot of exclusive third-party games anymore. Even the ones that are available for the Switch, and I love that Switch is so open to indies and all that, so is PlayStation. You can get all the same ones on the PS4 or the PS5 even. It sounds like Limited Run is finally going to... Microsoft is going to start letting them do games over there too. So you're just going to end up with the better performance versions of those same games over there as well. So like I said, I don't disagree with what you're saying about the Switch. It just doesn't capture me the same way because it just doesn't.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. I mean, like you've never, like you said, you've never been into portable gaming. You've never, like you weren't someone who would have like a Game Boy or like a DS or a 3DS and be playing Pokemon whenever you're traveling or whatever, or Mario or anything on there. You're basically strictly a home even if you had them, you're basically just prefer like home consoles. So it
Yeah,
makes total sense.
The irony is I do have that stuff, and we didn't even talk about any of them. Think about that.
But I mean, the difference is the Switch. You're lumping it in more with the portables, even though I would look at the Switch and the Wii U as a sports car, right? You get a Ferrari or Corvette or something like that, and then the hard top is going to be nice, but you know what's even nicer? The convertible. Now, you don't have to use the convertible, and it'll drive exactly the same as the hardtop, but you always have that option. And
Rob,
it's going...
is your goal to try and convince me to like the Switch? Because I don't know what to tell you. That's not how I feel about it. I'm not saying it's bad. I completely agree with everything you're saying.
You're also not saying you hate the Switch.
This is the most angry I've ever been at you, Adam.
It's not the Wii. It's not bad. It just doesn't magically capture me the same way it does like everyone else. I don't know.
People in the comments, can we please cancel Adam Koralik?
Yeah, go for it. Give it a shot. All right, but anyway, let's move on to the last generation, which consists of only 2 fucking consoles anyway.
Started in 2020 with the Xbox Series X/X and the PS5 digital and physical. And I'm going to give this an F.
Really?
I'm going to give this an F. And I've got both of them. And I like both of them. But what am I playing on them? I'm playing Xbox One games on my Series X. And I'm playing PS4 games on my PS5. Yes, I've got Halo Infinite, which is a Series X game. Yes, I've got things like Ghostwire Tokyo and Ratchet and Clank that are PS5 games. But they're leaning so much on backwards compatibility. There's so little in the way of new software, new experiences on these things. And, most importantly, you can't fucking get them. I mean, how can, if we're looking at the impact of a console on the industry and on gamers, if gamers cannot get the console, how can we say that it's impactful? I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. And granted, it's an incomplete grade, and this could end up being a fucking S tier. Who the fuck knows? I don't know. Maybe Nintendo's next console is going to blow us away. Maybe the PS5 and the Xbox are going to have like a Genesis and SNES level fucking console war, and they're going to blow us away. We don't know. But right now, a year and a half in, and you still can't find these consoles, and once you do, you barely have anything new to play on them, or exclusive to play on them, it's an F.
Okie dokie. So, it's obviously worth noting that, yes, he's right that this generation is so in its infancy, it's really hard to give it any sort of historical grade, and it's very active. I have to give it a D for mostly the reasons that he has cited, but where I also give it, I don't fail it because it's ridiculous to say that this generation is worse than the first gen. But where you can give it some points is he's right that what you're mostly playing is backwards compatible content. But if you don't include that, when do you? Because in our previous rankings, we've been kind of downgrading and deleting certain ones essentially because we know the generation after them improves upon them. So in a sense, the 9th gen is the PS4 and the Xbox One just made bigger. So with that being this case, this is finally where you include those 2 ecosystems. So between the two, yeah, I would say it's hard to say that the Xbox ecosystem isn't very well done at this point with, even though I don't use it, Game Pass and all that sort of stuff. But yes, Rob is correct. The PS5 has more standalone, exclusive, worthwhile experiences at this point, even if it's like 5 of them. And the Xbox Series X has like 2. And that one includes Halo and like Flight Simulator. Beyond that, it's just upgraded versions of games that still exist in the previous generation, but you have to put those somewhere. Otherwise, my answer wouldn't be the Wii U in the 8th generation. It would be probably the Xbox One ultimately. But if we're not including that, then I got to put that here. So I can't just say that this generation just sucks because we're just not there. But given how little content is exclusively specific to this generation, yes, I will give it a D tier on that basis alone. Anyways, Joseph, what do you got?
Well, if I have to give it a grade, it's a D right now because most people can't play them, and because most people can't play them and get them, game makers can't actually make exclusives for them. Or they can because they have. I mean, Returnal exists, but most of the games have to be cross-gen still because so few people can actually get them. And yeah, I know we had the same thing between like 7th gen and 8th gen. But that was different. It wasn't the case of people not being able to find the machines back then. It was people not necessarily justifying buying it yet. Now, even if people want to buy a PS5 or a Series X, they have to get really lucky or have like memberships to like stores that they spend like $200 a year to get on Best Buy's like Total Tech things. So they can get exclusive chances of buying it and still tend to not get the thing. And stuff like that. So for right now, you kind of have to just put it at D because right now it's basically just Gen 8.5 instead of 9. At least as far as it feels, as far as like content goes, and people can't buy them.
Okay, and Joseph, your favorite 9th gen console?
PS5, which
really
it's still too early to call. But remember, I only got the Series X for Game Pass.
Okay. So, according to this, the best generation of all is the 6th generation. Probably not surprising. We all ranked as an S. Then it looks like the 4th generation, because it was 2 S's and an A. Then 8th generation, 2 A's and a B. 5th generation, 2 B's and an A. 7th gen, 3 B's. 3 B's. Then 3rd gen, 3 C's. 2nd gen, 2 D's and a C. 9th gen, which is 2 D's and an F. And then we all ranked, and then 1st generation comes in dead last, 1 D and 2 F's. So there you go. The best generation of all time, indisputably the 6th generation. The worst generation of all time, the 1st generation. And based on our simple voting from consoles, the 2 greatest consoles of all time are the Magnavox Odyssey and the Sega Master System because they were unanimous.
Indisputable facts.
Yes.
So the greatest console of all time is also part of the worst generation. It is science. All right, well that'll do it for this. Thank you, Oliver. I hope you enjoyed this. I told you he likes to make us talk for 7 years. But
is this going to be the longest podcast? Because I feel it's going to be the longest.
It's very possible.
Us alone have been like about an hour and 45 minutes. So
it's
the longest podcast.
Oliver loves to do that to us. But thank you, Oliver, all the same. Joseph, thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
And we are back. We are back with the movie man, as you've now become. Keith, what's up, dude?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be here. It's good to be at the cinemas, as it were. Now we have finally arrived at the same bat time and the same bat channel.
I mean, that's pretty accurate because, as you guys know, if you listen to last month's, we basically talked about all the Batman movies for like an hour, except for the new one because we hadn't all seen it. Now we have, so we thought, what the hell? Let's just talk about it. So Keith, I should say this: if you haven't seen it, this is like full spoilers. We're not going to hold back on anything, so tune out now unless you've seen it and want to talk about it. Keith,
yes, sir.
Go ahead. Your thoughts, your impressions. What'd you think?
Whew. Well, a lot to unpack here. I'll tell you one thing. This is definitely the darkest Batman movie that I can recall. And I'm not really talking mainly about content. Mainly in the way it's been shot. It felt darker than a lot of the Batmans I've seen in a while. Which is really great. Good tone to start with. Ixnay on the origin. You guys, we've seen it before. We don't need to see it again.
I was totally lost. I had no idea what anything was going on because I didn't know how he became Batman.
I know they don't explain it exactly as well as Wonder Woman 84, but they are working with a character that is widely, as we we reviewed all those movies anyways. He's been widely in the cinematic universe, as it were. So Batman, played by Robert Pattinson, surprised the heck out of me. I'll tell you that much. I really enjoy his acting when I'm actually not thinking about Twilight. It really helps me out. But whenever I've actually seen him act outside of Twilight, I've been quite impressed, and I'm impressed with his job currently with Batman, honestly. I definitely got a lot to unpack with the villain and stuff like that, but we'll just start out with the movie starting out with all of the kind of like a Robert Pattinson narration or so, as it were. And Robert Pattinson is talking about, basically describing... was he describing Batman, right? Or was he describing a scene? I can't really remember. He's describing Batman as a person, right? Or the idea of Batman, I believe. Is that what you guys recall?
Yeah. Symbol concept?
Yeah, right at the beginning. Right, it's Robert Pattinson's voice, from what I believe. And they're talking about, as the bat symbol, the symbolism, as it were. And I really enjoyed that, because that's one of the main things, is that Batman can't be everywhere, but the symbol can be seen from anywhere. And it influences people, even just a whisper. And I read a review, actually, that people didn't like that villains on the street didn't know everything about Batman already. Interestingly enough. I don't know. So that's kind of the start, start's really great. I'm not sure if we want to do kind of a just go through the movie piece by piece, or just say what we like about it.
Well, I think...
What were you thinking?
Here's how I think we should do it. Let's talk about the actor in Batman. Let's see what we think about him. What we think about the villain or villains. Let's talk about supporting cast. And then we'll talk about the story and then the film as a whole. And then kind of and by the end we should have kind of an idea of where we all rank. So let's talk. So what grade would you give Robert Pattinson as a Batman? Or where would you rank him?
Yeah, let's go with the ranking system here. With Robert Pattinson's Batman, I'm actually going to rank him my number 3 Batman. Actually, behind number 1 being Michael Keaton, number 2 being actually Ben Affleck, and then number 3, Robert Pattinson is my number 3.
I would give him number 4, same ranking, but I would also put Christian Bale ahead.
Yeah, I do.
Excluding Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy.
Yes, absolutely. Live action only. I'm mainly saying I do have a point for Christian Bale. That spot does switch around from time to time, but I cannot stand the Christian Bale Batman voice for too long for some reason. It's something with my ears.
That's fair. That's definitely fair.
And that's all it is. All it is.
Yeah. I am actually going to rank him ahead of Christian Bale, and I'm going to put him either 2 or 3 on my list. I think he's a fantastic Batman. He's a young and angry Batman.
Absolutely,
I think he's vicious and vindictive and angry, and I love that he's basically this emo kind of grunge kid. He just listens to Nirvana in the Batcave, and
he's missing the control that most of us don't get until much later in life.
Yeah.
Batman coming out straight out and he's a 36-year-old fighting isn't as, plausible as a nice 20-something-year-old one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I like by the end of the movie, it kind of you get a character arc in how the way he views himself and how he needs to carry himself in terms of how he's viewed by Gotham. Because at the end, after the Riddler breaks down the seawall, he has to portray the hero. He has to be a hero. He can't just be vengeance. He can't just be revenge and this dark ghost in the night. He's got to be something. He has to be a symbol You know, it can't just be a symbol in the sky. He has to be the symbol, and he has to portray that herohood to Gotham.
Absolutely. That's well put.
Yeah.
What do you think about his voice, though? What are you guys thinking about his Batman voice?
I like that he doesn't talk a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually prefer that. I agree with that, yeah.
And when he does, he whispers. He's talking to Catwoman, or he's, you know, he might be interrogating somebody, he's yelling at them, but he's not talking a lot, you know.
I think that was Robert Pattinson's way of giving him a Batman voice without going straight. It's so easy to go growly to try to hide your voice. It's so easy to do that. You know, it's one of the easiest things to do, man. You know, but Robert Pattinson's choice to do the whisper and his voice choices, I definitely took note of that, and I was definitely proud of the way they portrayed it, with the fact that he was good way to put it, whispering. Good way to put it. And even when he was yelling or declaring something, it wasn't, you know, over dramatized. Best way to put it.
Yeah. I thought it was realistic. You know, he lets his fists do the talking, and you know, and they do a lot of talking. That scene on the subway platform where he beats up the gang, and like he doesn't just knock them down. He grounds and pounds and fucking beats the living shit out of them before moving on. It's like
by the way, that scene is by far my favorite part of the whole film. It's pretty much the opening where you don't. The whole idea is everyone has heard of the Batman at this point, but he's still kind of an urban legend. So you see all these shots of these people like looking in the shadows, and they're like, "Is he here? No, he's not here. Oh, is he there? No, he's not there." But then at the subway situation, he is there. And then the whole sequence itself is very well done. By the way, I could tell that was filmed in Chicago pretty damn quickly.
Chicago is the modern day equivalent of Gotham all day. I mean, it's perfect.
Well, there's a lot of CGI in that. It's just basically it's not actually like they filmed chunks of it and they film other chunks and then they kind of compile it. It's not really just a raw shot. Like Dark Knight was shot raw here. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. But all I'm saying is that scene was a great opening scene to kind of set up the tone of the movie, and I loved that. But I'm not going to lie, kind of after that, not as great. But we'll get to that.
I think you kind of touched on it, Keith, like the look of Gotham in this movie, and we didn't really discuss talking about this, but this is, I feel, the most comic reflective Batman movie in terms of how Gotham is portrayed. Gotham isn't Chicago. It's not Manhattan. It's not a Greco-Roman fever dream like Joel Schumacher's movies. Gotham is a city that time has moved on from, that the good have left. It is a festering wound that is open and bleeding. And I like the way it's like you could tell that 100 years ago Gotham was this amazing Art Deco paradise, but now it's the facades and the infrastructure are crumbling. It's empty factories, abandoned buildings, and then hell is paved with good intentions. And this has all this Gotham progress thing where we're going to build all these new things and do Gotham justice, and they're never finished. The Gotham is one big construction site that's left. It's that festering wound. It's open. It's continuing to bleed. And I think Gotham looks great in this movie.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially one of the first murder scenes. You kind of see that the building that they're in and whatnot the first time.
Yeah.
Definitely see the aesthetics of the buildings and whatnot, but yeah.
And, by the way, another big thing in favor of the setting of this movie, except for one scene, the entire movie is shot at night.
Yeah, court, yeah.
And the one scene that is shot in the day is a dark and gloomy fucking funeral. That is and it's mostly indoors. That's the only scene that's shot.
The best way to put it is the sun never shines in Gotham City.
Exactly. You know, that's why I think I look at this and I see the comic books that I love, and I see video games like Arkham City or Arkham Asylum. Like it's comic, not accurate, but it portrays that same vibe that the comics do.
Absolutely.
This is not. It's kind of on. I'm kind of talking about what you're talking about, but to speak to the geography of it, I can't help but acknowledge The Dark Knight because both of them were shot in Chicago. And as someone who actually lives here, there's one thing I think you guys might find kind of interesting. Do you remember the part where he basically takes like the backgliding suit and just kind of like jumps off that building and then like lands in the street?
Yeah.
That is actually the exact same spot where the truck flips in The Dark Knight.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Man.
That's LaSalle, and it's right in front of the what the hell's that building? It's a bank trade building or something like that. I'm gonna remember the name of it later and then get mad at myself. The Board of Trade, Chicago Board of Trade, is the one in
Every time I think about that truck, I swear to God, I keep thinking about how they covered Heath Ledger's F-bomb in The Dark Knight. It still makes me laugh to this day. You know, Joker looks and he's just like, "Fuck," but you don't hear it. I don't know.
Yep.
Just interesting thing there. Okay, so we covered kind of like what we thought about Robert Pattinson. We also went through kind of the aesthetics of the movie, as it were already. Honestly, any ideas on like you guys want to go like on Catwoman or villains?
Let's do the villain first.
Or do you want to talk more? Okay, yeah. So
I kind of want to talk generally, but go ahead, keep it on topic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there are specifics I had. That's why I want to make sure I hit them.
Yeah, fucking Paul Dano. Holy shit, I love.
Oh my god, yeah, he did a hell of a job.
It's the fucking Zodiac killer, like as the like Jesus Christ. It's like they portray this grounded Gotham, but it's like extravagant in all of these like weird ways. It's like if the Zodiac was like a terrorist and could blow up, seawall flooding a city. It's like that's what that kind of feels like. And Paul Dano, I've gained so much respect for him as an actor. He was in Little Miss Sunshine. He was in Love and Mercy.
The Girl Next Door.
Girl Next Door. Such a great actor, and he
versatile, man.
Surprised the hell out of me.
There Will Be Blood.
Colin Farrell. Holy fuck. Unrecognizable as the Penguin.
That's why I was going to give major points to.
We're going to be I want to like almost dedicate a section to him. We can get Riddler, but one point I got to cover with Riddler, being the massive fan of comic books I am. No offense to most people, that is not the Riddler.
Yeah.
Though I do think he is a fantastic villain for Batman in this world. Well done. It could have been easily done with some of his many other smaller villains, such as either a Clock King or the Calendar Man, even Victor Zsasz, many more characters. Riddler in particular, he was always different from the rest. That's why he never went to Arkham. He always went to Blackgate. He always went to regular prison. He never went to Arkham. Most times he ended up in regular prison a lot of times because he was mostly just kind of just an evil dude.
Yeah.
He's not as psychotic. So that's one point I did want to make.
On point about the Riddler, and this is kind of a criticism because it's as someone who does make content with followers. I mean, the Riddler in this film, he is ultimately a guy who has like followers he's trying to get, who watch his videos and whatever, and he's going to recruit all these people to come and like cause chaos at the end of the movie, right? Like that's what's going to happen. So I can't help but think, and this wasn't my own original thought, I thought this, and then other people have too, that Riddler in this universe had to have made like videos where he's just like, and then we will go out and we will begin our chaos. And then he would have had to have been like, okay, make sure to like and subscribe and follow me and support me on this and that. You don't see that part of
join my serial killer Patreon.
Exactly.
That he Shadow Legends.
And I would have just loved to have seen that. Be like, make sure to subscribe on Instagram as well. You're like, because he had to do that.
And for my Patreon subscribers, you guys get extra content.
You guys get early access to my psycho rants.
Yeah. And for my OnlyFans, Maskalisk. Yeah, maskless, baby. Sorry, I had
You get to see my eyelids. But yeah, but that's all I'm saying is like that took me a little bit out of it because I'm like, wait a minute, how do you I know you can't personally from doing it. You can't cultivate a fan base without saying certain things, and he's within the movie he can't say those things. But I'm like, no, I want to see the version where he did because he had to have done it. But that's just like my, that's just me nitpicking about little shit. But overall, yeah, no, the performance on it was great. I hated his. I don't want to. I'm going to jump ahead if I start talking about that. So let's fall back to Colin Farrell. I will say Colin Farrell's performance was so phenomenal that I did not know it was him. Yeah. And somebody once said this to me. They said the true mark of a great actor is when you're genuinely not sure that is them. Yep. And not because you just don't know who they are, but because you do know who they are and you don't recognize them. Gary Oldman being a perfect example of this. Like, Gary Oldman's been in a million things where you're like, oh shit, that's Gary Oldman. Like, because he's so good at, like, becoming the character.
he's played Commissioner Gordon and he's played Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
exactly.
Winston Churchill was wonderful, yeah. Darkest Hour,
Yeah, but that's all my point is that is the only time I've ever seen Colin Farrell like that. Mm-hmm. Where I'm like, holy crap, that Colin Farrell was Penguin? How? Like, and granted, part of it is, like, prosthetics and part of it is actually CGI.
No, the voice.
But it was... Yeah, but overall, I was stunned, absolutely stunned that happened to be him. It's just that the irony is his character was kind of pointless to the narrative. Like, he translates some Spanish. That's mostly his purpose in the story.
He is the impetus for a really, really good car chase.
Yeah, I guess, but, like, that's just justification for an action scene, and that's fine. It's just that I hope... Well, actually, we know now there isn't going to be a direct sequel to this because Robert Pattinson's not on board and him and DC have split. But had there been one, it would have been nice to think that they were setting him up as a potential future villain, which probably was something of the intention at some point.
Didn't they say they're giving him they're doing a HBO Max crime show in this universe? That's what I heard.
But let's keep it real. I heard that too.
I think he's one of the characters in that.
Yeah, but let's keep it real, dude. The reason they're doing that is because they don't have Robert Pattinson anymore, and they're just trying to capitalize before it completely craps out. Like, that's all that is. Like, they're just going to be like, oh, maybe people will watch it because we have Colin Farrell. It's not going to be the same without Batman, and we all kind of have to acknowledge that reality. Mm-hmm. But, like, all the other... remember there was a Gotham show, the Batman-less Batman show? That didn't really last. The same with Krypton, the Superman-less Superman show. You can't do that. There was an Alfred show. There was a fucking Alfred show. Yeah. It's called Pennyworth.
You know what? You know what I do want to mention specifically in regards to kind of the Penguin and the world that they're building. There's one thing that this reminded me of more than a lot of other things. I'm not sure if you guys have played it, but this reminds me a lot of the Telltale Batman games in terms of the story and the characterization of how certain characters are presented, like the Waynes being corrupt, basically a crime adjacent family and alternative presentations of characters. It reminds me a lot of that, and I actually loved those Telltale Batman games. There's 2 of them. And I will say, if you did like the Batman, I do recommend going to play those.
Oh, very nice.
Fair.
Yeah, I gotta say about Colin Farrell, his performance was to the point where I actually forgot about Alexander for a little while. Like, I forgot he was in that movie and did that to me. And I feel so much better now about the movie in general. Thank you, Colin Farrell, for making me forget that. And that you know that character you played in Daredevil.
Yeah.
I kind of hit that. I kind of hit that. Can I get more peanuts? More peanuts, please.
So the only reason he did Daredevil is because he wanted an action figure of himself, and they never made it, and he got pissed. So he stayed away from comic book stuff for a long time.
They actually eventually made it. But it's kind of funny. It didn't matter. It's not when he could have profited from, which I think is funny.
Yep.
So let's
what about
let's move on and talk. Yeah, talk about supporting characters.
Gordon,
Alfred, Catwoman, yeah.
Let's get the Catwoman out of the way. Catwoman, excellently acted and done by Miss Kravitz. Wonderfully done.
Yeah.
I definitely love her. I think she's a gorgeous and great pick for it. I really don't feel as though Catwoman was necessary for the movie, though. Like, there was any point for her to actually be in the movie, per se. But... You know, it's cool. I'm glad she was there. It was good, like, first time you ever saw Catwoman idea. But again, with Batman, these characters are always there anyways. In the comic books, it's very common to see Catwoman or the Penguin for just a second in any story, even just for a second. And I did enjoy that about the Penguin and Catwoman in this movie.
Yeah, that's what I view Penguin and Catwoman as kind of fleshing out the world.
Yep.
In the same way that it's like the way they name drop certain things. They Catwoman name drops Bloodhaven, which is
hard too. Yeah.
Yeah. If you read the comics, that's where Nightwing operates. If they name drop the Iceberg Lounge as Penguin's club, I thought that was
also
great.
Star City was dropped as well.
Yes. And at the end of the movie, just kind of fleshing out the world and making it feel more lived in, like the comics, they send Riddler to Arkham, and he's in the cell next to, he's not named as the Joker, but he is the Joker. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I like that. It's like, you don't have to have Colin Farrell as a main part in the movie, as like your main villain. You have your main villain. You're just fleshing out the world. You're using the Penguin as a means to an end in the very same way that Batman uses him in the comics. You need some information on something, you go to the Iceberg Lounge, you break a few kneecaps, and you get to Penguin. It's like that's how it feels in the comics, and I appreciated that.
Actually,
it reminds
me a lot.
Animated shows too.
I was just about to say the animated show. Whenever he goes to Arkham, you always actually see almost every villain too.
Yeah,
and kind of see who's in Arkham at the time. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Keith on this. Like, Miss Kravitz did a fantastic job, but she wasn't super necessary, although she was super tied to it anyway, which I think is part of the problem, because that movie is like an hour too long. And I think a lot of her scenes were just kind of pointless. Like, I know they were supposed to give us more of an emotional connection to the what the hell's his name? The villain that ultimately gets sniped by John Turturro's character. Like, I know she's supposed to have a tie to him, and it was supposed. I don't really think all that landed all that well. And she's also kind of tied to the dumbest element of the movie, narratively up to a point, which is like everything in that movie is pretty grounded in reality, except for her like magical contacts that act as cameras.
I think
was the only.
No, but that was Batman's tech that he gave her.
I know that, but that was the only thing like that in that film. Everything else, like even the Batmobile, was basically just a souped-up sports car. Like everything was basically somewhat realistic, but that tech, unless the U.S. military is hiding that somewhere, we don't have that. And so that was the one thing where I was like, this is from a different Batman universe.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. That was like that in the grounded context of that reality.
I could suspend my disbelief by like if Wayne Enterprises is like a military contractor and they're supplying stuff, to the U.S. military or whatever.
I can.
It's Rob, it's like they could have access to like tech.
Rob, I can believe that too if there's other elements of that. The Dark Knight went to an extreme length to make that case. They were like Wayne Tech, all our stuff that the military doesn't want. We have this like material that you put an electrical current through it and it turns into wings. We have these like tanks that we don't use. We have all this shit. It explains it, but it's a ton of it. There's a whole plot developed to it. This movie goes out of its way to be like, this is like if Batman was real, except he has magical contacts. That's the one part where I'm like, the hell? That doesn't quite fit with everything else. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. It doesn't fit the aesthetic. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, Zoe Kravitz good at the role, good at the material she was given. I'm just not really sure her character was all that necessary the extreme lengths of which we got her.
I think Batman needed an ally other than James Gordon. We'll talk about Gordon in a second. Because if you think back to the character arc, which I kind of talked about earlier, is that this is a journey from Batman being a symbol and agent of vengeance and violence against like the city in the shadows, to becoming a human hero, a symbol that Gotham can, like, it's a tangible symbol that they can look to for hope. So if you're going to transform Batman from this, this force that lurks in the shadows and just beats up gang members and is a terrifying boogeyman, to somebody that after the end sequence of the city flooding is helping people escape and helping rescue efforts and doing this, and is going to kind of transition into the Batman that we traditionally look at him as. You need to flesh out his thing, so Catwoman allows him to break down that emotional wall and have that connection to another human being, like, other than familial respect for Alfred or professional courtesy to James Gordon, but it's more of an emotional.
So what you're basically justifying something which I actually agree with you. No one disputes the function of that character. I'm saying it didn't really fulfill it very well, thus it's kind of dead weight.
Yeah.
I don't know, because the only time Batman really talks in the movie is to her. So
yeah,
he's got to start talking to somebody.
Yeah, I guess. I also think they kind of dropped the ball on Alfred. Not that the performance was bad of
jump right in.
He was great. Andy Serkis was good. It's just that, like, after the hospital thing, they have like one scene and you never see him again. Like, he doesn't actually show up again in the movie.
Yeah, they definitely downplayed Alfred's importance, for sure.
Yeah, he was really kind of irrelevant in that movie. I also enjoy seeing Andy Serkis actually play like a live character instead of a CGI thing. I always think that's kind of fun. But yeah, like, that was fine. There's what else? There's so much else I want to talk about, but I don't want to like jump around too much.
We just got one more character to do. I think just do Gordon, and then we could have a little free for all. All right. So
to be honest, I really didn't have much to think about Gordon. I thought he was fine.
I thought he served his role just fine. I liked him just fine. What I really liked that they did with Gordon was have Batman there ASAP, right from the beginning, in the crime scene. Everybody get out of the way. Here's the Batman. I always enjoy that aspect of it. So I'm glad they put that in there. Has nothing really to do with the way the character was done, but I just like the way those scenes were done, I guess.
Yeah.
Not a huge thing, not a huge standout, that's for sure.
Yeah, there was one scene where I found it difficult to suspend my disbelief, if we're kind of talking about that.
Okay.
The scene where Batman gets taken back to the GCPD, and he's being like held, and he's in the room with like the 20 cops that want to rip his mask off and lock him up in prison or whatever. And like Gordon convinces them to like let him take him into an interrogation room, and then like
that was
a whisper scene.
You get beaten up, even though all the cops are like, "Dude, we know that you're friends with him. Like, why are you
that one?" That in those rooms are mic'd.
Yeah, exactly.
So like the loud whisper scene.
That's why Batman whispers.
Yeah, but he's loud whispering, and what do they think he's talking about then?
Yeah.
Like,
before
like,
that,
are they just breathing at each other?
Yeah.
Before that scene, I thought
scene
they hit
was
the relationship really well. Actually, I thought before that they hit the cop relationship really well. The fact that it was changing and the cops were getting a little less trustworthy. Yeah. I like that part and stuff. But yes, absolutely, Rob, I agree with you. Once it got there, it went way off the market.
Yeah,
but
I appreciate that they gave an expanded part to Gordon in this movie, because above all things, this movie is a detective movie, and it really does a better job than I think any other Batman film in that portraying Batman's not just like a ninja, and he's not just a billionaire and a super genius, whatever. He's a detective. That's how Ra's al Ghul refers to him as, is the detective.
Raish.
So you're going to like finally show that properly in a movie and looking at crime scenes. And that's why I think the Riddler's a good villain in this, because it provides like ammunition for Detective Batman.
Not only that, but with the whole detective thing, they're actually portraying him as not the world's greatest detective yet. They're actually showing him gaining skills to become the world's greatest detective. Gaining from
the Riddler
his,
defeats him. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I read so many dumb reviews where people just wanted him to be, what's called OP in the video game world, overpowered from the get go. I'm just like, guys, he can't.
He's 20-something years old. Yeah, he's got to learn.
He's been out there for 2 years. He's building things. He's been punching his way for 2 years. His frustration, his pain away for 2 years, and now it's his time to be something more. Like Rob said, it's time to step up, and that's what he's doing through this movie. It's a great evolution. Damn curses, DC, Robert Pattinson. Wow, I want this movie to continue. But maybe
I know. I really wish that we get a sequel.
As free for all as this is getting, we should unleash the Adam Sikol, because he wants to go, man. And what are you thinking, Adam, man? What do you want to do, man?
All right.
Go,
so
man.
I'm gonna tell you two things. I'm gonna say one thing I really disliked about this film.
Yeah.
And then one thing to kind of make up for it that I'm not sure that anybody else is really talking about, or maybe they are, I don't know. But that I think is positive. So one thing I intensely dislike is essentially the entire third act of the film. I feel like the movie is supposed to end when John Turturro's character is shot. Like, that's the logical conclusion of the story that has been built up to that point. You catch the Riddler, or maybe you don't even catch him. You leave it kind of open-ended, but he fulfilled that goal. It seems like the story's kind of wrapping up, and then you realize like there's another hour of this, and it's going to go on to be like, oh, now we have to have. It feels like that's where the director. That feels like where Matt Reeves. What?
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because I'm just remembering that when that scene happened, I looked at my watch to see actually how much time was left. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. That's what's
because I'm right. Because it's the natural time.
Right. Yep.
It's the natural time for that to end. So to me, it feels like Matt Reeves is a director, and I don't know this. It just feels like it. It feels like he got to that point, and that's where the movie was supposed to end. But someone at Warner Brothers is like, you can't just end a movie like a Batman movie. This is our big comic book guy. You got to have a big third act where there's a big fight and big explosions and stuff. So it tacks on a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like, first of all, you kind of throw the Joker in there, which you're only doing because the Joker is popular and everybody wants to look forward to the possibility of a Joker movie, which isn't going to happen, as we know. In fact, that's been since confirmed, by the way, that it was in fact the Joker, and we even know the actor who played it. Like, it's all like it should have been a mystery villain. There's been suggestions of characters like Hush and like Batman has a million great villains.
Yeah,
but they don't use them
that
ever.
That could easily be Victor's ass, easily with the cuts.
Yeah. But they always just use Joker because he's so popular and well known and whatever. That's a marketing decision, or at least it comes off like one. Then you have, I'm sorry, but the whole thing about, oh no, the flooding of the gates. I'm like, when was that mentioned? That we're even on an island? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's never been significant. Like, that's basic setup and payoff.
No, they did mention the seawall in regards to the revitalization of Gotham. And like how I said Gotham is an open wound that's not being sutured up. It's not being fixed. It's just being kind of... and they said, like, the seawall's in desperate need of repair. So it's like they did
and that's so basic though. Like,
but it's structure. But it's still like it's enough to say it's like if Gotham is supposed to be New York, New York is an island. You've already seen it as an island in other movies like Dark Knight Rises.
But that's because first of all, Manhattan is real. That's the difference. People know basic geography. All I'm saying is that movie kind of failed to set up the significance of those the seawall. That's all I'm saying. It just didn't do a great job of being like, hey, this would happen if something happened to these things. That's all.
In regards to that, though, I will agree with you that the movie's too long, and there was a logical stopping point that they blew past. If it was up to me, I would have ended the movie with the destruction of that seawall, because what this movie is setting up is a sequel that, realistically probably isn't going to happen, at least anytime soon. Where if, like, I know, Keith, you're into the comics as well, and I assume, Adam, you've heard of this, is No Man's Land. That's what it's setting up.
Oh, yeah.
It's setting up Gotham is isolated and abandoned, and crime lords are carving out little fiefdoms all over the city, and Batman has to take them down. You got a little bit of that in Dark Knight Rises. They took a lot of that. They took a lot of the Broken Bat ideas and put it in Dark Knight Rises. So I felt that if Matt Reeves is looking at a Batman 2, he's looking at a No Man's Land storyline, and you've already introduced your Joker, you've already introduced your Riddler, you've got your Penguin. Who else is in there? And then that's
Catwoman could have her apartment in there as well if they want to throw her back in, of course.
Well, but she's already left at this point. So, so you have to, so you could introduce, different villains. You could introduce the Victor Zsasz. You could introduce the Hush, Deadshot, or Scarecrow, or whatever. It's kind of leaving it open ended like that.
That's one thing I do like about leaving the first 2 years of his career open, is what could have happened during those first 2 years. You can insert almost any villain there. It's wonderful.
Yeah. You've inserted the Joker because you saw the Joker in Arkham. You know that he's already encountered him before.
Yep.
So I think you're misunderstanding my point. Mine isn't that I find the concept of the seawall bad. I find their execution of it bad. Yeah. Because it's not properly set up. Set up, payoff. It doesn't work that way. They essentially, yes, maybe there was one obscure reference to it, but when the audience can't absorb that and then they're like, huh, what? That's not a good sign. So the movie does not pay that off correctly. Now, the content based on the comics and the movies, the animated movies and all that, the TV show, yeah, I get where they're going with it. That's all fine. I'm not saying that that's a problem. I'm simply saying their execution within it is not good. Then it goes on too far to sort of even attempt to resolve it. Granted, they don't fully resolve it. Obviously, that is kind of the whole point. But then they get down to he's got his essentially TikTok followers coming to show up, which just seems kind of stupid and insane. And trust me, as someone who has people who follow him, handful at best will show up to something like that. And that's he's got 500 followers. The typical rule is 5% at best of anybody in your base will ever show up to anything. And that's if, we're talking going to a convention, not show up to start shooting at people. That's fucking nuts. But that's different. So stupid fight scenes, I get there's a couple of moments in there that are kind of good, like you keep pointing out, Batman kind of taking a torch and leading people out because he's trying to be a leader, he's trying to be a hero, not just a force of vengeance. I agree with that, the visual metaphor of it. But then it's juxtaposed with again, the breaking of the realism. At one point he's like, oh, I'm so injured, I'm going to take out this green magic gas you've never seen at any other point in the movie.
Is that the Bane serum, by the way? Because that's what I feel that it was alluding to.
Yeah, they really. That could have been anything, honestly. That could have been kryptonite serum. Who knows?
That was exactly what I was about to say. That could have been liquefied kryptonite for all we know. That was just stupid. And that's kind of how I felt exactly about the seawall. You can't just... That's like what The Room does, where you just introduce stuff, immediately use it, and it's resolved and never referenced again. You cannot do that in a real movie. And so I had huge problems with that. But like I said, I think the third act is a clusterfuck in its current form. It could have been substantially done better. I would have seriously cut down on Catwoman stuff, and I would have concluded with the seawall and just the knowing the foreboding danger is coming in a potential sequel, which unfortunately will probably never happen anyway. But you also have to properly set up the seawall. To go back to within the Batman franchise, Batman Begins, for example, the whole ending of that film is they're using the train system to spread the gas everywhere, right? To kind of terrify all of the citizens. But the movie went to incredible lengths to explain how the train system works. That way the audience understands setup, stakes, and payoff. You cannot just introduce these Deus Ex Machinas of conflict to just come in and be oh, tension, because the script needed it. It doesn't work like that. Now, on the flip side, I'm going to give one huge compliment to this movie that no other Batman movie has ever done, which is this is the first time, if you ask me, where the character of Bruce Wayne is actually relevant to the plot. Now, you guys know, because we've talked a lot of Batman, there's essentially 3 characters there. There is Batman, there is who Bruce Wayne really is, which is like the tormented Batman without a suit on, and then there's like fake Bruce Wayne, who's like the billionaire playboy, right?
I'm more like there's a fake billionaire playboy, and then there's Batman. That's pretty much all there is. As far as I know.
Don't see that, like, there's Batman. So you're saying, like, when he's at home brooding, he's still the billionaire playboy?
Hey, all I gotta say is when Wonder Woman's lasso goes on him, he answers Batman.
That's fair, but that's my point, because he really is that character with and without the suit, but still publicly and even privately, he would still be Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I get
it's
that.
just that when he goes out on the town, he acts like a fake person.
Yeah.
So there's kind of 3 versions of the character. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, the only thing I think is technically Batman and Robin. It is Bruce Wayne's observatory and everything. He's the reason why it's built and stuff. And so that's what they used at the end to like threaten the city, I guess. So technically,
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is oddly, funny enough, is pretty much the only other time in the entire Batman franchise where Bruce Wayne is relevant to the plot.
Yeah. So what time I think
is Batman and fucking Robin. Where that one scene where he's like the fake billionaire playboy version who's like, I'm donating this thing and just don't aim it at my house. You know, like that's that stupid joke that he tells.
People come first.
Yeah. In the entire like Dark Knight trilogy, the public persona of Bruce Wayne is just some rich guy who's not relevant to anything that's going on. His parents were, at least for Batman Begins, but he himself was not. The public version. The same thing goes for, if you include them, the Ben Affleck version. I mean, they're basically totally irrelevant there. He doesn't even really have a Bruce Wayne, per se, a public version.
Yeah, sure.
And then the whole Tim Burton / Schumacher era, you know, there is, in the original Batman 89, Michael Keaton's got that one scene where he's hosting a party, but it's completely irrelevant to the plot. It's just like so the audience knows what he pretends to be like.
Also the scene in Batman Returns when he's doing the meeting or whatever, right?
Yeah, but again, that's not relevant to the plot. It's just so that the audience can have the characters interact from different vantage points.
Well, it's actually the reason why Max Schreck actually goes into business with the Joker is because he's getting blocked on everything by Bruce Wayne.
First of all, you mean the Penguin.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
That happens prior.
Oh, fair enough, man. It's your
Batman Returns.
You know that movie better than I do. I'll give it to you all day.
Yeah, trust me on this.
I'll give it to you all day.
Where Bruce Wayne is talking to Max Schreck in Batman Returns is actually not about Max Schreck. That's to give the audience some exposition on why Max Schreck is doing anything that he's doing.
Oh, it has more to do with reality, Kyle, too. Jesus.
Exactly. It's exactly that. So it's to develop the relationship between those two characters. But again, Bruce Wayne is not really relevant to the plot. But this movie, The Batman, is the first time ever where the character of Bruce Wayne has anything to do with it, because the Riddler is targeting him without having any idea that he's Batman.
I love
and
that.
it drives the story forward. That was like, oh shit, that's legitimately cool. I'm on board with that, because usually Bruce Wayne is just kind of portrayed as a random citizen of, you know, even though he's like the richest and most obvious person in the world to be Batman, he's portrayed as just, hey, he's the local rich guy that nobody ever thinks of because he lives in a cave off by himself.
In the 60s one, does he do anything, or is he literally just a rich guy?
I don't remember the 60s movie well enough. I mean,
I don't think there's even a Wayne Industries then.
No, he was just a rich guy.
Yeah, just a rich guy. Yeah, come on. Sorry.
But yeah, so that would be kind of my overall thoughts. Is I think the movie is fine. Everybody was talking about it like it was the greatest thing ever made. I really wouldn't rank it that high among the actual like Batman movies. I think that some elements of it are fantastic, but it is got bogged down, particularly in the third act, where you just kind of look at your watch, as you pointed out, and you just go like, dude, is this over yet? And that's never a good sign when you're just worried about how long something is taking.
True.
Let's give our final thoughts. You know what? Here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I do remember from my ranking. I said that yes, okay, we're not talking about Phantasm. Phantasm is the best Batman movie.
Yes.
But it's not a
Live
live.
action
If we're talking live action movie, the best movie starring Batman is The Dark Knight. This is the best live action Batman movie. That's what I will say.
Okay. Okie dokie. So how would you letter rank it?
I would give it an A minus.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fair.
Like a solid like 91. You know.
Oh yeah, good solid 91. Yeah, that's good. Let's see. In my rankings, I actually put it above The Dark Knight Rises, but not above Batman Begins or Dark Knight. Above the Schumachers, of course. But yeah, I'm gonna rank it probably as one of my top Batman movies, live action Batman movies. I did enjoy it for so many different reasons. Luckily, when I'll be able to watch it in the future, the clock will not matter because I'll be able to pause and do as I please. So I'm looking forward to enjoying it more on my second, third rewatch, and I hope you guys go out and enjoy it too. If I have to give it a letter grade, I'm just gonna give it a solid, straight up A for awesome. It's an awesome movie, not the best Batman movie, but it's a pretty awesome movie considering one of the comic book movies are out right now.
You guys are not going to be happy with me.
It's all good, man. It doesn't matter because your opinion is yours, man.
I mean, you just ranked the Wii U as the best 8th generation video game console, so you can't go much.
I did, and because I'm correct.
Be great.
Yeah, it's. Hey, I have justifications, but it doesn't matter. He's ignoring all of those points.
Right.
But anyway, I would probably rank it as the 6th best live action Batman movie.
Cool.
Like I would take the entire Dark Knight trilogy and the 2 Tim Burton films over this. It's because while elements of it are fantastic, so much of it is just extraneous pointlessness that just didn't need to exist, and it's just too long without being. It doesn't justify its length. It just feels tacked on, particularly that last 45 minutes just did not have to be there. But that's me. As far as letter grade, I'm gonna go with a C+. It's not terrible. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I really feel like it needed another draft or another editing run. But it might also just be a victim of its production. I mean, that movie went into production pre-pandemic, then had to stop, start. And I also know that Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson had massive tension on set to the point where they refused to work with each other, which is why you're not getting a sequel, by the way. He also apparently hooked up with Zoe Kravitz on the hood of the Batmobile, in between shooting.
Nice.
And that
nice.
And so that caused a lot of drama. So that is
the most Batman thing I've ever fucking heard.
Yeah, I mean that's
holy shit.
And it's kind of cool, actually, admittedly. But
yeah,
all I'm saying is none of that is on us as an audience. We're just supposed to judge it based on the product, but I can't help but see all that and be like, that translated to the project, because I guarantee if they had a better relationship, certain things would be different. And you never know how that affects things like reshoots. Maybe some of it only exists because that's how they had to do it. Because I don't know. To me, it just wasn't a very enjoyable experience. It wasn't a miserable experience, and there's certain elements like you said, the Riddler himself and all that, the way that's handled is fantastic. But then there's other elements where I'm just like, this is in the wrong movie. Your little green spray juice and all that shit, the magical contacts. I'm just like, these don't fit in this movie. And then you bog us down with irrelevant subplots. A lot of the time, it just kind of feels like a MacGuffin movie without an actual MacGuffin. Well, we have to learn to translate Spanish, so let's take it here, and then we'll take it to the Penguin, and then he'll fix it, and then we'll have to do this. I don't know. It's detective work, but it's kind of lazy detective work, because it's not a very interesting puzzle. It's just a guy trying to figure out how to use Google Translate. I mean, really, the whole movie goes awry. The whole movie goes awry because Alfred just decodes the thing wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah. You got a point.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Whatever. Not terrible. I feel like it needed a few more drafts. That's all.
That's all good, buddy boy.
All right, so thank you everybody
Yeah.
for joining us. Keith, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Also, shout outs to Joseph Tamburino and Abdullah. Thank you as well to Oliver Clare and Chuck Shaw for their subjects. And shout outs to Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Paul Lewis, and Trey Wagner. And thank you guys all for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe as always, and we'll see you all later.